Hello guys and welcome to today's Nugget. Today we are going to talk about Windows Information Protection or WIP. So I've been looking forward to doing this Nugget since very long and finally here we are. So as always, let's just start with today's agenda as in what we have in the agenda for this session. We are going to start with introduction to WIP as in what exactly WIP is, what exactly Windows Information Protection does, and then we are going to talk about why we exactly need Windows Information Protection, and in general, what does information protection actually needs. In today's cloud managed world, the number of devices is increasing day by day. Earlier, there was a time wherein a user had probably one laptop. Now a user has probably two or three laptops or maybe desktops, couple of mobile devices, and he wants to access his corporate data from all of these devices, which makes the role of information protection more important. So we are going to talk about what exactly information protection needs and how we can achieve it. Then we are going to talk about the similarity and the difference between Windows Information Protection and Azure Information Protection, formerly known as ARMS or Azure Rights Management Services. Then we will talk about WIP Data Lifecycle, as in we are going to talk about the life cycle that takes place right from a moment when a device is enrolled and WIP policy is targeted onto that device until the point wherein the device is unenrolled and the encrypted files need to be unencrypted by the end user using a DRA certificate or whatnot. So we are going to talk about the data life cycle. Then we will talk about what exactly DRA is, and we will talk about auto recovery, a feature which Microsoft has introduced since the anniversary update of 1607. Then I'll share a few tips and tricks and the common things that we can keep in mind, the caveats and the gotchas which we can keep in mind so that we can go ahead with a successful implementation of a WIP policy. Then we will talk about how we can validate that WIP has actually reached the client's device. We will talk from the logging level. We will talk from the registry level. We will track it from all the angles possible and try to figure out how exactly we can successfully say that WIP has actually reached the device. And then we have to make a call that whether if the device is not behaving as per the policy, then we have to make a call and understand that is it a device specific issue or whether an Intune specific issue. Then we'll do a little play with WIP wherein I'll show you what exactly happens. I'll demonstrate the auto recovery feature to you guys. And then we'll do a live demo wherein I'll enroll my device, wherein I'll make a WIP policy. I'll show you guys, walk you through all the blades in the portal related to WIP and show you what exactly needs to be configured, how it needs to be configured, what configuration needs to be made, and then I'll show you guys how to exactly validate it at the client's level and what's the behavior of the end device when the WIP policy hits the device. Then we will talk about a little. Then we will talk about an important aspect related to WIP, that is enlightened and unenlightened application. I just wanted to cover it under a different section because there is a gray area as far as enlightened and unenlightened apps are concerned. What exactly enlightened apps are and unenlightened apps are? What's the difference in their behavior? Can an unenlightened app become an enlightened app? What is a managed app? We will talk about all of that. Then I will give a demo on Power BI. It's a Windows desktop app. It's an unenlightened application, unmanaged application. I'll show you guys how to play with that application and how and if we can make an unenlightened application a managed application and what's the difference in its behavior once we do that using something called App Locker. So that is what we have in the agenda for today. I am really excited to share this information with you guys. So let's just get started. So the first thing that we need to understand about Windows Information Protection is that it is not an Intune feature. That's the most important thing that we need to understand. WIP is something which
is embedded in the OS. So it's a feature of the OS, it's a feature of Windows, which was introduced since the Redstone update, that is 15.11. Windows 10 15.11 had this feature in it. It's a security feature, and so there's that. So it's a feature of Windows, not a feature of Intune. Via Intune, what we do is we target that feature, make some policies so that the feature behaves accordingly. So that's the first thing we need to understand. WIP, not an Intune feature. Okay, and there has been some name change that has been done recently, so I would like you to know about the same as well. Earlier, this solution was referred to as EDP, or Enterprise Data Protection. It was, as I said, it was released in Windows 10 15.11 or the Redstone update. But later on, with the release of Windows 10 16.07, that is the anniversary update, we changed its name. The verbiage changed from Enterprise Data Protection to Windows Information Protection. So just the verbiage has changed. So even though the verbiage has changed from the policy level, if we go into the registry of the machine of a Windows 10 16.07 or 15.11, we will still find that the keys are named as EDP and not WIP. So the verbiage has changed, and we have made the changes at the portal, at the Intune portal level. But when we actually go into the device, the verbiage over there has still stayed at EDP. Probably that's something which might or might not change the future releases. Not sure about that. So that's the second thing. And the third and the final thing that we need to understand is to make use of WIP, we don't need any special licenses. If we have a EMS E3 or a E5 license, which gives the user the ability to enroll his device to Intune, that's going to be sufficient for us to make use of WIP. So WIP is basically a MAM policy, right? We go into the same blade of Azure from wherein we activate the WIP policy. So it's like it's a MAM policy target. So MAM policy for Windows is WIP. So for MAM policy, we don't need any special kind of licenses, right? All we need is the EMS license E3 or E5, or the Intune license if we don't want to make use of AAD Premium and Azure Information Protection. So as long as the user has the ability of enrolling his device to Intune, he will be able to make use of all the MAM policies as well. Therefore, he will be able to make use of the WIP policy. Okay, so WIP, not an Intune feature, earlier known as EDP, and we don't need any special licenses to make use of the WIP feature. Okay, all right, moving right along. That brings the question, why WIP? Why exactly do we need it? So if let's just say that we have got 100 users in our environment, and those users are making use of any corporate application. So all the data that they save via that corporate application is a corporate data, right? So it's the user's responsibility to respect the stewardship of the data that is given to them. The end users are responsible if that data goes missing or if that data falls into the wrong hands, right? So WIP is something which helps the end users achieve the same. What WIP does is it makes use of a mechanism called tagging, and if we have an enlightened application, meaning an application which can understand the WIP policy, then when the user is trying to save a document via an application, the WIP policy, if is applied, helps the application give the user an option whether he wants to save that document as personal or whether he wants to save it as corporate. Now, if the user is using MS Word and he's trying to save a file which has corporate data, he will be making that selection and saving it as a corporate data. Or if he's using the same application for any personal file, he will be making that selection while saving it, and he will be saving that file as personal. So WIP is intelligent enough, it gives us that option when we are trying to save the file. And it gives it's a solution which differentiates between what is a personal file and what is a corporate file for the same application. So if we have an enlightened application, meaning an application which is able to understand the WIP policy, we have quite a few out of the box, and we are still increasing that list. So if WIP is targeted on an application which is enlightened, and if that application is able to understand what WIP is telling it to do, the policies, then it will be able to differentiate between the personal docs and the business docs or the corporate docs. What this means is each doc is actually tagged as personal or corporate. Therefore, the personal docs are saved in a different container, so to speak, and the corporate docs are saved in a different container. What that helps us to do is, let's just say in an event that we have to unenroll the device, let's just say it's a corporate device, the user is moving out, that device is going to somebody else, so obviously we will be unenrolling it or wiping it. In that case, all the corporate data which was associated with that application in the device is going to be wiped, but all the personal data in that device will not be wiped. What this means is, same device, same application, two different files, one tagged as personal and one tagged as corporate. The corporate file is removed, the personal file is not removed when the device is wiped. So that's where WIP is very handy. It's not deleting all the files associated with the application, but only those files which were tagged as corporate are going to be deleted. So let's just say that we have a BYOD scenario wherein the users are not making use of the corporate devices, but the users are making use of their own device. They are enrolling into Intune. In that case, the users expect as little management of the device as possible. And that is where Intune and WIP feature of Intune comes into picture. It is just restricting you in that application. It's not making any other change to the device if you're making use of, let's just say, WIP without enrollment. So let's just say that we have a corporate data, and using WIP we can make use of feature as in we can stop the leakage of data from a corporate document to a personal document. And this is actually why we use WIP at the end of the day. We all make mistakes, and WIP accounts for that. Let's just say that 9 out of 10 users are making use of the same application, making use of the same document, and by mistake they would at some point of time end up copying the data from a corporate document to a personal document, not intentionally, unintentionally. That is where WIP would chip in, and it would give them a prompt saying that, hey, you are leaking the data. Are you sure you want to do it? If you're doing it, you might as well be logged. Or it might just prompt them saying that, you know what, you cannot just do it. So this is why we actually need WIP. The users need to respect the data that has been given to them and the integrity of the data that has been given to them, and WIP helps us achieve the same. Okay. So now let's just talk about, now before going too deep into WIP, let's just talk about what information in general needs, what information protection needs, and at what level can we actually protect the information which the user has, we as an admin. The first level at which we can protect the information is at the device level. I'm not talking about the hardware protection, but there are some kind of tools which we have, which we can make use of, and it helps us to protect the system and the data. Let's just say in an event wherein the system is stolen. The most common example for this would be BitLocker. Then another way of protecting the information would be by separating the information, not storing all the information for an application likewise, but tagging the information like we were discussing. That's something which WIP does. Same application, some documents are tagged as corporate and some documents are tagged as personal, depending upon what the user chooses at the time of saving the document. So data separation is something which is also very important. The data needs to be separated in the same device from personal and corporate. Again, this is something which we can achieve using WIP. Then comes leak protection. Leak protection, as in, let's just say that users are using their same old routine job and they unwillingly leak the data. That is, they unwillingly copy paste the data from a personal device, from a corporate document to a personal document. WIP would help us achieve the same. There are many other softwares as well which can help us in stopping the leakage of data. And then finally comes in sharing protection. This is what we would use if the user is willingly trying to move the data out of the organization. So leak protection is when the user is unwillingly making an effort to move the data from corporate to personal, and sharing protection would be when the user is willingly doing it. So we will actually see in the next slide where exactly the different solutions fill these gaps. So if we take a look over here, as we discussed, device protection is something that can be achieved via BitLocker. It's very commonly used technique, and I believe nowadays most of the organizations have made it compulsory to encrypt your drives using BitLocker. Data separation, yes, we discussed that. Windows information protection tags the data, therefore the corporate data for an application are going to be tagged as corporate and the personal data is going to be tagged as personal. Therefore the data is going to be in a way separated in different containers, so to speak, by tagging. Then another feature of WIP is leak protection. As we discussed, if we are copy pasting data from, let's just say, a corporate document to a personal document, WIP comes into the picture and it gives us a prompt. It might stop us from copying the data, or it might give us a prompt saying that, hey, the device is this activity might be logged, depending upon how exactly the policy has been configured. And finally comes sharing protection, wherein we are moving the data out of the organization willingly. This is something which cannot be achieved via WIP. For this, we will have to make use of AIP, or Azure Information Protection, formerly known as Azure Rights Management. So EDP was before the verbiage we used before. Now we refer to it as WIP. ARMS is the verbiage which we used before. Now we refer to it as AIP. Okay, so this is where exactly the technologies fit in. If we are trying to protect the data at the device level itself, we will be using BitLocker. If we want to separate the data in different containers or do a leakage protection, we will be using WIP. For leakage protection, there are other softwares as well, like we have Office DLP or Semantic DLP, which does more or less the same kind of thing which we are doing, which we might be doing using WIP. And finally, sharing protection, wherein if we are trying to restrict the users from sharing the document outside of their organization, we will be using Azure Rights Management, or AIP. Okay. So now let's just talk about a little bit more about what WIP is. Well, I would say it's the closest thing there is out there to a WIP. But then again, it's not exactly a WIP. Now, why do I say that? Because DLP it's not exactly a DLP. Now, why do I say that? Because DLP is something which stacks in on top of the OS. So we have the OS, and on top of that we have the DLP solution, data leakage protection solution. Like, we install the Windows OS and then we might install something called Office DLP or Semantic DLP or McAfee DLP, whatever the case may be. The thing with WIP is it's not on the OS, but it's in the OS. So we don't require to install anything on top of the OS to make use of WIP. It's a security feature released with 16.07 Windows 10 Anniversary Upgrade Edition, and it comes embedded in the OS itself. So that is why exactly I wouldn't call it a DLP, but it provides us all the functionalities a DLP would do. Therefore, it's the closest thing out there to a DLP. As we discussed, it tags the data. Therefore, each file that we are saving using a WIP will be tagged as corporate or personal, depending upon the selection that the user is making while trying to save the document. And hence, the computer realizes that, okay, this is a personal data or a corporate data. Therefore, in the event of unenrolling the device or wiping the device, the relevant documents which are tagged as corporate get deleted, while the relevant documents which are tagged as personal still stay on the device, even though both the documents were coming from the same application. Now, let's just take a moment and try to figure out the difference between WIP and AIP. So WIP actually comes into the picture when the end users have access to the data, but they are not actively protecting it, meaning they are making they are doing something which they are not aware of, and in an event of making that or doing that action, they end up leaking the data. For example, let's just say that the user has 3 notepad instances in his device open. The first one is corporate, the second one is personal, and the third one is also personal. Now the user is making some changes in the corporate notepad document, and by default everything is going on fine. He's able to save the document, the WIP policy is targeted on the notepad, and everything is going on fine. The document is saved as corporate. Now let's just say by mistake he copies a line and pastes it onto the notepad instance, which was not corporate but which was personal. So over here he is making he's doing an action which he is unaware of. He doesn't want to do it. That's not a mandate action, but he mistakenly copies the data from corporate to personal. Over here WIP would come into the picture and it would give him a prompt. But on the other hand, on the other end of the spectrum, we have ARMS, or Azure Information Protection. This would come into the picture when user is moving a document which he has thought about. What I mean by that is, let's just say that there is a WIP policy which is applied on Outlook. May that be Outlook Web, that is Exchange Online, or may that be the Outlook application. So that what WIP would do over here is, if we have the appropriate policy set, it would stop the users from moving the data or the text or the attachment from the body of the email or subject line of the email outside of the Outlook application. But if the user was to forward that email to, let's just say, from abc.xyz at microsoft.com to abc.xyz at gmail.com, then effectively what he is doing is he is leaking the data outside the corporate boundary. WIP would not be able to protect it. This is something which the user is doing willingly. He cannot just forward the email and just type in his personal email address by mistake, right? He has to make that selection. He has to enter it. So WIP believes that this is something which the user wants to do. Therefore, it does not interfere over here. If we want to stop the users from forwarding the email as well outside the organization, that is, if we want to restrict the users from leaking the data knowingly, in that case, we will have to make use of AIP. That is Azure Information Protection. So in a way, what I'm getting at is WIP and AIP are both side-by-side technologies which actually complement each other. They are not replacing each other. They are not each other's replacement, but what we do is, ideally we would make a WIP policy, and in the policy itself we have a tab, we have an option to enable the AIP, that is Azure Information Protection, and use the AIP policy which we have made in a separate page. So both the policies would go hand in hand, both complement each other, and both are not supposed to replace each other. WIP will not be able to protect a document or to stop the sharing of document outside the company identity. That is something which has to be done with AIP. So we can use WIP and AIP in tandem, and using that we can provide the best user experience. So I hope that this slide helps us understand the difference between what WIP and AIP is. However, I would like to take a little more time and help us understand what exactly are the differences between WIP and AIP. So first of all, if there is a WIP policy on a user's device and the user is doing the normal action, the user is copying and pasting data between corporate applications, there will be no additional prompt. If the user is saving the document as corporate, there will be no additional prompt. Everything will be by design. The only place wherein WIP will prompt is when the user is not keeping the data in the family, so to speak, where the user is trying to move the document from let's just say he's trying to save a corporate document as personal, or he's trying to do a copy paste of the data inside a corporate document to a personal document. But if he's not doing that in the general flow, WIP is not going to give any extra prompt to the users. Also, we need to remember that WIP would never, it's not an antivirus, so it's never going to stop the malicious users or hackers from accessing your devices or accessing your corporate documents, so to speak. It's a solution for the users so that it helps the users to maintain the integrity and the stewardship of the data, as we discussed in the very first slide. It will obviously come into the picture when the users have access to the data, but they are not actively protecting it. They are unwillingly making a change which in a way would result in leakage of data. That's where WIP would chip in. But in case of Azure Information Protection, things are a little different. If Azure Information Protection is implemented, it gives a prompt to the user. For example, if I am forwarding an email which was there in my mailbox from abc.xyz@microsoft.com to abc.xyz@gmail.com, that is outside my corporate boundary, if AIP is implemented, then by design it would stop you from forwarding the email, if that is the way the policy has been set. And in the process of doing that, it would give us a prompt. It would say that, hey, you are forwarding it outside your corporate domain, I won't let you do it. Or it will give you a prompt that, are you sure you want to do it? So when it is going with the normal flow, still it's giving you an option, and it requires some kind of user intervention. In case of WIP, if we are moving the document from corporate to corporate, there is no prompt. If we are moving it from corporate to personal, only then there is a prompt. But in case of AIP, if the policy is set that if somebody is moving the information from corporate to personal, they should be prompted. In that case, it would require a user intervention, meaning some user action is pending on the user, even if everything is going by design. In case of AIP, in case of AIP, the user is active and has an idea that it's a critical document and needs protection, as in he's forwarding the document, he knows that it's a confidential document, he's still forwarding it, and in an event of doing that, he is getting that prompt. So AIP is actually a solution which we would use for a data which somebody has thought about. when the user is doing an action, knowing that he is moving a critical document outside the corporate space. But WIP, in case of WIP, it's more like user is not aware, user is unwillingly doing a copy paste of the text of the document, and then in a process of doing that, he's leaking the data. Therefore, WIP is just going to make the users aware that, hey, you are not doing what you're supposed to do. Are you sure you want to do it? Azure Information Protection, or ARMS, provides us more granular level of app policy. And there's one more thing which I would like to mention, that WIP, if we are using WIP, we have encrypted a file, we are moving that file to a removable storage. In that case, the keys of Azure RMS come into the picture for WIP as well. What I mean to say is, if a document is protected using WIP and if a document is being governed by ARMS, both use different sets of encryption keys. We will be going more into the encryption keys later on the deck. But as of now, let's just understand this, that AIP has its own way of encrypting the files and protecting it. WIP has its own way of encrypting the files and protecting it. But when we are moving the data outside of the device itself to a removable device, then WIP makes use of AIP encryption keys. So what I'm getting here is, guys, the best way of understanding WIP and AIP without getting confused would be AIP and WIP would work together, and depending upon what the admin is trying to achieve, we can set the WIP policies. And if we are trying to restrict the users from forwarding their documents willingly outside the corporate boundary as well, we can set the AIP policies as well, and we can integrate the both. How we can do that, we will come to that later in this deck, in this slide. What we actually do is we make an Azure Information Protection, or ARMS policy. It has a template. We link that template to the WIP policy. Okay, so I hope that this helps us understand the basics between what WIP is and what AIP is, and that one does not replace the other. One is something which we configure from Intune, while the other is something which we configure from Azure, and both work in tandem and both are used to complement each other. Therefore, both can be integrated with each other. Okay, now let's just talk about the WIP data lifecycle. So I am enrolling a device. That device has an application, and that application is targeted by WIP. So where and how exactly the policy flows, the data gets encrypted, and how exactly the data behaves is what we are going to try to understand in this slide. So the first thing we do is enroll the device. We will be enrolling it just like how we do it. Go to settings, access work or school, enter the credentials, and then if we have enabled the auto enrollment, the device would first get Azure AD registered, then the device will get Azure AD enrolled, and it will get Intune enrolled. So depending upon what the policy is, the first thing that has to be done is, obviously, if we are talking about WIP with enrollment, the device needs to get enrolled. Once the device is enrolled, all the policies, not just WIP, all the policies, may that be app protection policy, may that be configuration policy, whatnot, all the policies are going to be delivered to the device once the device is enrolled. Along with those policies, the WIP policies will also be delivered to the device along with the keys. So I don't want to get into the bottom of what keys I'm talking about right now. We will be discussing about all the kinds of keys that are used with WIP later in the slide. But let's just understand that at the time of enrollment, all the policies, including the WIP policies, are going to be provisioned to the device. Now, let's just say that in the policy, we have defined a corporate boundary, as in But let's just say that in the IP resource, we have identified that anything which is in the range of 192.168.0.0 to 192.168.255.255 would be referred to as, or should be treated as, a corporate boundary. So if we are, or let's just say that we have in the cloud resources, we have put in sharepoint.com, and anything which is there in Exchange Online for a specific user would be treated as a corporate location. Okay, so if the user from his device is trying to download a file from SharePoint Online, or if he's trying to download a file from OneDrive, or if he's trying to download a file from any file share server which has an IP of 192.168.1.1, which falls in that IP range which we have defined in the policy, that data, whatever he's trying to download, let's just say if it's a text file or a Word file or an Excel file, will be downloaded as a corporate file. So if the data is coming from a corporate location, that data automatically is protected. So we have defined that whatever is there in this location is a corporate location. No files in this location are personal. So if the end user is downloading from a corporate location, that file is going to be saved as a corporate file. That won't be saved as a personal file. So WIP is intelligent enough to understand that, okay, this is a corporate location. We are downloading a file from a corporate location. It has to be a corporate file, hence would be saved as a corporate file. That is data ingress. That is when the data is coming to the device. Now let's just talk about data genesis, or the data use. User has downloaded all the files after enrollment which he needed to do. Now he is making use of the data. He has opened various applications. He has opened various files. Some of them are corporate, some of them are not corporate. When he tries to move the data from corporate to personal, as we already know, WIP is going to come into the picture, and it's going to either prompt him to make sure that he doesn't do it, or it's going to prompt him saying that you're doing an unauthorized action. Are you sure you want to continue? So that's the data genesis, as in the usage of data. Now let's just talk about the next phase. Would be the user has enrolled the device, user has got the policy, user has downloaded the application, or not the application, user has downloaded the files. That's under data ingress. Now user is making use of the files. That is under data genesis. Now let's just say that the user is trying to move the files from that device to another device. If he's trying to do it to a removable storage, then WIP would come into the picture again, and it would again encrypt the document as corporate, and like that it will be moved to the removable storage. Therefore, if the person who is plugging in that removable drive to a device which is not in that corporate boundary, he will not be able to view that file. So that would be under data egress if the data for WIP is moving out of the device. And finally, the data wipe. So let's just say that the admin has initiated a wipe of the data, or he has retired the device, or the user himself is unenrolling the device. What's going to happen in that scenario? Yes, we already know that WIP has already tagged the data. WIP already knows that what is the corporate data and what is the personal data for the same application. Therefore, when we wipe the data, only the corporate documents which were there in the device are going to be removed. So this is how exactly widely we would be classifying, or widely we would be placing the different segments, or in the different ways in which the data would behave and process in a WIP lifecycle. We enroll the data, we enroll the device, the WIP policy comes in during the enrollment. That would be under the enrollment phase. Then the data ingress would be something like, if we have a protected location, from there the WIP data is coming to the device, whereas in the user is downloading that data. Data genesis and use would be when the user is making use of the data and moving the content of the data from a corporate to personal location, corporate to personal files and vice versa. Data egress would be when we are moving the data out of the device, and data wipe finally would be when the admin is initiating a wipe command. So this is just I would say a block diagram which is here there to help us understand at which phase exactly the issue is coming. Let's just say that the WIP policy is not hitting the device. We are at the first or the enrollment phase. We are not able to download a document from SharePoint Online, and it's not getting saved as work, even though SharePoint Online is a work protected location. That would be under data ingress stage. We are trying to copy paste the data from a corporate file to a personal file. It's still getting copy pasted, even though in the policy we have said that it should not it should block the data, or it should only allow overrides, or whatever the settings may be. Or maybe it's maybe we have done a silent setting which says that the data should be copied but it should be logged. It's not happening. We are the data genesis. The issue is at the data genesis stage. Data egress, well, we have already discussed. The data is moving out of the device, and then data wipe. So this is where exactly we would be classifying, how exactly we would be classifying, and then if an issue is coming during troubleshooting, which we will see later, we will find out at which stage exactly the issue is popping up. Okay, moving forward now. Okay, now let's just come to the interesting part. Let's just talk about the DRA, or data recovery agent. So before we actually talk about the DRA, I would actually like to talk about another component, a few of the components of DRA. And the first thing that I would like to discuss would be EFS. So let's just talk about EFS first, and then we will come back to DRA and try to understand what DRA is. EFS signifies encrypted file system. Again, it is something which is not by Intune. It is a Windows feature. So even if we are not using Intune, WIP is still there. We still can make use of it. Even if we are not using Intune or any other MDM provider, EFS is still there, and the device is making use of it. Okay. All right. So EFS, encrypted file system, built-in feature of Windows. It's basically used for it's basically a disk-based encryption. So what it does is it does encryption of the disk. Works with Windows Explorer. And EFS not only does an encryption, but also gives us an option of recovering the data in case the encryption has gone wrong, or in case the encryption keys are lost. These are the encryption keys which we were talking about earlier. We will be understanding what these encryption keys are very shortly. How EFS works? EFS makes use of the AES algorithm, 256-bit key, and it encrypts the data. What happens is, let's just say that user has a device, right? And user is touching a lot of data. He is making use of a lot of data. Okay, in his device there are many text pads, text files, there are many Excel files and whatnot. What happens is EFS is going to encrypt each file with the advanced encryption standard key. So EFS would encrypt each file and using its key, and that key which the EFS has used to encrypt the file will in turn be encrypted by user's RSA key. So what is the user's RSA key again? So when the user logs into a device using his username and password, his password goes through a one-way hashing process, and a key is generated from his password. That is the RSA key. So to sum it up, there is a device, and there is a device of the user. There are many notepad and text notepad files and Excel files. Those files are going to get encrypted using the EFS key, and that EFS key is going to get encrypted by the RSA key of the user. So what this Okay, so that is the basic of what EFS is and what EFS does. We're not talking about the DRA yet. How to enable the EFS? Very easy. If we have a PKI infrastructure, all we need to do is we need to go to the root CA or the intermediate CA, go to the certification templates, and over there we already have a inbuilt template called basic EFS. We just need to, we can make use of that same template, or we can duplicate that template, make a new one, customize it according to our need. It already has everything which we need to make use of EFS. All we need to do is we need to give the end user permission to this template, the enroll permission, and when the user logs in, he's going to get a certificate issued from the EFS template. That's how it works. So EFS, just to sum it up, encrypted file system, built-in feature of Windows, nothing from Intune. It encrypts each file, gives a seamless experience to the user. So the end user would not even know that his files in the device are getting actually encrypted. So it's a security feature. How it encrypts it? It gets a certificate. Certificate has its pair of keys. Those keys will be used to encrypt the data, and those keys in turn would be encrypted using the user's RSA key. So when the user tries to access the file, his RSA key unencrypts the key of the EFS, and using that key, the data is unencrypted. How do we make use of EFS? Just go to the CA. Over there we can see the basic EFS template, and we can just duplicate it if we want to, or we can just make use of the same template with the same name and just make sure that the user has enroll options to it. That's the basic of EFS. So now that we have got EFS out of the way, now let's just talk about the DRA and data recovery. So DR is data recovery, and DRA is the data recovery agent. Okay, so let's just talk about what is data recovery, and then we'll be talking about what is the data recovery agent, or rather who is the data recovery agent. So data recovery is actually a process in which, let's just say that the name signifies recovery of data. So it's a process wherein, let's just say there is so as I said in the previous slide, that there is a EFS, that there are EFS keys which are used to encrypt the data, and those EFS keys are in turn encrypted by the user's RSA key, and that RSA key is saved in the user's profile. So let's just say that the user's profile is compromised. Let's just say that the user's profile is damaged or corrupted. His RSA keys are gone. If his RSA keys are gone, he cannot unencrypt the EFS keys. And if he cannot unencrypt the EFS keys, he cannot unencrypt the files which were encrypted by him. So in this case, what we do is a data recovery. So going by the definition, data recovery is a process in which a user who loses access to his encryption keys can provide his encrypted data to a designated administrator known as a data recovery agent, who can then decrypt the files and return it to the user. Okay, so data recovery is the process wherein we are decrypting the files, and data recovery agent is the person whom we go to decrypt the files. And I hope we understand why we need to do that. The files are encrypted using the EFS keys, and the EFS keys are encrypted using the RSA key of the user, and the RSA key of the user is stored in the user profile in the device. And if the user's profile is compromised or corrupted, the RSA key is not there. Therefore, we cannot unencrypt the EFS keys, and if we cannot unencrypt the EFS keys, at the end of the day all the files are encrypted using the EFS keys. Therefore we won't be able to unencrypt the files. Therefore I hope we understand why we need the DRA. When does the need of DRA arise? The need of DRA arises when the user's profile, let's just say, is corrupted or compromised, and we cannot get hold of the RSA key of the user. Hence, we cannot unencrypt the DRA keys. So that's the DRA. and it's the unencrypting will be something done by the DRA agent. Now it brings us to the obvious question that we are saying that we would take the encrypted data to somebody called a DRA and he would be unencrypting it for us. So it sounds a little strange that how can a random person unencrypt a file which was encrypted using my RSA? How is that possible? So to the 10,000 feet view of this would be DRA actually works as a shadow to user's encryption process. So everything which the user is encrypting using his RSA key, or rather using the EFS key which is encrypted again by the RSA, is encrypted using the DRA's key as well. So the same file is actually getting encrypted not only by the EFS key, but is actually getting encrypted by the DRA key as well. So when the user's key is lost, the DRA can step in and unlock the EFS key. Once, so what was the challenge to begin with? The challenge was the EFS key was encrypted by the user's RSA key. So all we need to do is unencrypt the EFS key. Once the EFS key is unencrypted, we will be, or decrypted, we will be able to get those keys and decrypt all the files. We cannot do it because the user's files are because the user's profile is damaged, therefore we don't have the user's RSA. So over here what DRA is doing is DRA is shadowing the user. So what the EFS key which was encrypted using the user's RSA is also encrypted using the DRA key. So if the user's RSA is missing, the DRA can come into the picture, and using his keys he can unencrypt the EFS keys. I hope this is not getting confusing. So the DRA would unencrypt the EFS keys, and in that process we will be recovering the EFS keys, then we will be able to recover all the data and return it. Okay, so it sounds very fair, right? Sounds very rosy. But the only challenge here is, let's just say user has 10,000 files on his device. All those 10,000 files were encrypted by the EFS, and the EFS was encrypted by user's RSA. Now the RSA goes missing. Now the end user has to go to the DRA. He has to take all those 10,000 files with him. He has to give all those 10,000 files to the DRA. The DRA will be unencrypting the EFS which was encrypted by user's RSA and the DRA's key. Using the DRA's key, he will be unencrypting it, each file by file, and he will be giving it to the end user. Not a very subtle experience, right? The disadvantage is every time the user has to go to get hold of the DRA guy, get hold of the person who is the designated data recovery agent, give him all the files, have all the files unencrypted step by step, and then get the files back. Not a very seamless experience, right? Okay, there is a way around that. So by default, DRA agents are something which are defined at the domain or organizational level by the network administrator. This was the setup till Windows 7. Now we don't have a DRA. We don't have a data recovery agent. Now what we have is a DRA certificate. So there is not a single person whom we have to go to and say that, hey, I've lost my RSA key, please decrypt the files for me. We can go to anybody who has the DRA certificate, and whosoever has the DRA certificate can decrypt for us. Okay, so earlier till Windows 7 we had to go to a specific person called the DRA. By default it was the local admin, or we can define the DRA at the domain, site or organizational level, and then we had to go to him to have our files decrypted. Now we don't have to go to a specific person called the DRA. We can go to anybody who has the DRA certificate with him, and using this DRA certificate we can unencrypt the file. Obviously everybody would not be having the DRA certificate. The DRA certificate would be somebody who is the admin. Okay, so it might as well be the admin which in the earlier case, it might very well be the same admin which in the earlier case we had defined in the organizational unit. But the point that I'm trying to make is DRA agent was something which we used earlier pre-Windows 7. Now we have a DRA agent certificate, and whoever has this certificate behaves as a DRA agent and does the encryption of the files. Okay, so I would before moving forward, I would just like to summarize this slide, because it's a little important in understanding the concept of how exactly the encryption and decryption is happening. I'll be quick before we actually move on to the next slides and see the loggings, and then do a quick practical. So data recovery, we need it because the user has lost his RSA keys. The RSA keys were used to encrypt the EFS keys, which were used to encrypt the files. So data recovery is the process by which we go to a person called data recovery agent. The data recovery agent shadows the user. Therefore, his RSA keys, which were used to encrypt the EFS keys, if it goes missing, then the DRA agent also has a key which were used to encrypt the EFS keys. So using that key, we decrypt the EFS keys, and we take that keys and then we decrypt all the files which the user has. Hope this makes sense. Now again, it brings us to the same question here. It sounds good, the approach is right, but the only problem is every time the user faces this issue, he has to go running to either the DRA or a person who has the DRA certificate, give him all the files and get unencrypted and have them decrypted. Not a very good end user experience, right? So there is an alternative there is an alternative way of recovering the key as well. The alternative way would be, every time the EFS keys are getting encrypted by the user's RSA key, how about we send those RSA key to the CA, to the certificate server, to our certification authority server. That is, how about we save that RSA key in the certification authority database. So in an event that end user's profile in the device is corrupted and he has lost the RSA key, he can reach out to his PKI admins, and the PKI admin can go inside the certification authority and check the database, and for that user they can find the RSA key, provide him the RSA key. Once the user has the RSA key, using that he can unencrypt the EFS keys, and using the EFS keys he can unencrypt all the data that he has in his device. So this is a more seamless approach, I would say. There is no need of the DRA agent. The user does not have to go looking for a DRA agent and give him all his files and have him unencrypt his files and give it back to him. So it's less fuzzy. But here, the only problem with this approach again is, obviously we need a PKI admin, and the end user has to reach out to the PKI admin. Not that easy, right? The end user has no idea who the PKI admin is. The end user probably in a mid to large scale organization would be reaching out to the help desk. The help desk would be creating a ticket for probably the server admins or the PKI admins, and the end user will be providing his details to the PKI admin. The PKI admin will be providing the key back. So every time, eventually in this flow for this alternative key recovery area, every time the end user would have to reach out to the PKI admins, which is not the easiest approach, right? Because we might have 10,000 or 10,000 plus end users in a mid-scale environment, and we might actually have 10 to 12 or maybe 15 PKI admins taking care of our infrastructure, right? So just imagine most of the users every other day losing their RSA key and reaching out to the PKI admins. Again, there's a flaw out there. So before we talk about how that flaw can be remediated, let's just talk about where exactly can we get the DRA certificate, which we were talking about earlier. So we were saying that there is a person called DRA. We need to either go running to him. By default, since Windows 7 it was the local admin, or a person which is defined in the organizational unit. Since Windows 8 onwards, there is no designated data recovery agent, but data recovery agent's role is played by somebody who has the data recovery agent certificate. So whoever has the certificate can behave as a DRA agent and unencrypt the file for the users. So where do we get this data recovery agent certificate? We can make use of the EFS certificate if we already have one. If we have a PKI infrastructure, we can get one issued, getting in touch with our PKI. Or if we don't have one, we can make use of the cipher command. So all that needs to be done is we need to go to elevated command prompt. Just note here, guys, I would go a little off track here. This cipher command is used to generate the EFS, the DRA certificate, but it needs to be generated from a device which is joined to the domain and a device which does not have WIP policy targeted onto it. So if in the policy, not if, I would strongly recommend making use of a DRA certificate. When in policy we are uploading the DRA certificate, please make sure that we are extracting that certificate using the cipher command if we don't have a PK infrastructure from a Windows machine which is joined to the domain and which does not have the WIP policy targeted. Okay, so that's how we can get the DRA certificate. Again, DRA certificate is needed for not encrypting the files but for decrypting it. So I'm not saying that without having the DRA certificate we will not be able to make use of WIP policy. The policy will be there. The policy will work absolutely fine. The user's file will be encrypted, but in an event that the user loses the RSA keys, his file cannot get decrypted. Well, there is a way around that. We'll talk about that later. Therefore, I would strongly recommend making use of a DRA key. Okay? All right. Now let's just talk about automatic recovery. Let's just say, for instance, the end user called. The end user was making use of a device which was enrolled to Intune. The end user called and said that, you know what, I'm leaving the organization. Please unenroll my device. He called the Intune admin, or the Intune admin got a ticket saying that this user is leaving the device, leaving the organization. Therefore, we need to unenroll the device and give it to somebody else. Okay. So the ideal process would be the Intune admin would be taking the device ID and the user ID. He will be going to the portal, going to the devices section, entering the device ID or the user ID, probably entering the user ID, see all the devices that are enrolled by that user. If there's only the one, then he will be making sure that he has the correct device by rechecking it with the device ID, and then he will be doing a revoke or a retire or a wipe. Once he does that, as per the design, the data is gone. As in, all the corporate data is gone, the personal data is still there. The user can take the personal data, delete it himself, and then the device can be handed over to somebody else. Everything is fine until now. Now, let's just say that the admin mistakenly revoked the wrong device. How about that? Very much possible. Let's just say that the user had 3 devices enrolled. He's not actually leaving the organization, but he's giving up one of the devices. So he's giving one device to somebody else. The admin, the Intune admin, went to the portal, entered the UPN, and mistakenly retired or wiped the wrong device, or revoked the wrong device. Or the end user, let's just talk about another scenario wherein the admin is not actually doing a wipe upon which the files get deleted, but let's just say that the end user mistakenly is unenrolling the device from Intune. He had many files which were WIP protected. Now those files cannot be opened because, well, it's a corporate document and you're no longer in the corporate boundary. Now what? Now he has to get in touch with the PKI team, tell them to give him the DRA certificate. The DRA certificate will be used to unencrypt the EFS keys, and the EFS keys will be used to unencrypt all the file that is present in his device. It's a messy, right? It's a messy scenario. So in rescue, WIP's auto recovery feature comes into the picture. What it happens is the PC backs up the auto recovery key with the AAD account. So when the user unenrolls the device, it's fine. He will no longer be able to access the encrypted files. It will be giving him an access is denied error. But when he enrolls the device again, the end user enrolls the device again using the same UPN, the same key flows into his device again, and he will be able to magically access all the files. Kind of cool. The end user doesn't have to go to the CA again and unencrypt the files or go to the DR. It's faster and more efficient. We will not have to go to the PKI team again. So automatic recovery feature in short is, there is an end user. The end user was making use of WIP. He had tons of files which were encrypted and tons of files which were not. He mistakenly unenrolls the device. He is no longer in the corporate boundary. Therefore, his access to all the corporate files are gone. It will be giving him an access is denied error. He enrolls the device again and he will be able to see all the encrypted files again. That's the auto recovery feature. Again, it's something which has been released in 1607 and later. So when the device is managed, the user has access to the files. When the device is not managed, the user does not have access to the file, and he can bounce between the two, meaning all he has to do is unenroll the device willingly or unwillingly, and just when he does that, all his access to the data is gone. When he enrolls it again, when not managed, no access. When managed, has the access. So it's like kind of seamless, and it's a feature which we will be actually seeing in action in further slides, that how exactly it works. Okay, now a little tips and tricks. I'm actually almost done with the theoretical part. We are very soon going to move into the practical, so I promise you I won't take a lot of time. Just wanted to share a little tips and tricks while making a WIP policy. Firstly, the second point, as I said, I cannot stress this anymore. DRA certificate is a must. I know that WIP can work even without a DRA, but I would strongly recommend, even if we don't have a PKI infrastructure, just generate a DRA and upload it. It makes lives easier. Okay, so DRA is a must. Secondly, by default, when we make a WIP policy, it gets populated with the cloud resources, right? So if we are, let's just say, SharePoint Online or OneDrive or whatever the case may be, right? So we can edit that, we can put in more features, we can remove it as per our requirement. Okay, So by default, one entry is there in the cloud resources. We will talk about more about what exactly cloud resources is and protected domains, network domains, and neutral resources later in the slide. But for now, let's just know that there is a tab in the policy, in the WIP policy, wherein we can configure cloud resources. We will ideally be doing it if we want to protect the data which is in the cloud, let's just say Exchange Online, or if we want to protect the data or SharePoint Online or OneDrive or whatever the case may be, right? So for that, we'll have to make the relevant entry in the cloud resource. Once we do that, there are some issues that we face. Issues as in everything for SharePoint and OneDrive will work absolutely fine, but let's just say that we open Google Chrome in that device. We open Google Chrome and try to connect to facebook.com or any site which establishes a TLS session. That is when exactly the issue starts creeping up, because the firewall in the device is actually a little cagey. It's a little restrictive. So in a device which has the WIP policy targeted onto it, and in a device which has the WIP policy configured in a way that it has the cloud resources configured in it, if we try to open a web browser and try to set up a TLS session and just open up a port, we don't go through the regular firewall layering, then the firewall has to make a call. It has to decide whether the website, the TLS session is the TLS session is for a website, right? Let's just say xyz.com. The firewall has to make that call whether this website is in the corporate domain, whether it's not in a corporate domain, whether if the user is trying to go to sharepoint.com, that's a corporate domain because it's put in the cloud resources. If he's trying to go to, let's just say, facebook.com, it is not. But if he's trying to make up a TLS session, if the user is trying to make a TLS session from Google Chrome, the firewall inbuilt is so restrictive and cagey that it gets confused that whether it should allow the access as work or whether it should allow the access as personal. And then in the process of deciding that, the firewall ends up not letting the user access the site. So it will say that ideally what we will see is, in the device, if we are opening up Google Chrome and if we are trying to hit a TLS session to a website, it will give us a generic message that you're not connected to the internet, even though you are connected to the internet, even though you are able to connect to the internal sites, even though you are able to connect to the sites which do not set up a TLS session. But when you're trying to access a site which sets up a TLS session, it will give you this generic error that you're not connected to the internet. A way around that is putting in app compat in the cloud resources. So if we put in the app compat, it helps the Windows firewall understand that even if we are making a TLS session which is in the corporate boundary and which is not in the corporate boundary. Okay, so putting in the app compat again is not a necessity. If we are not putting in any entry for cloud resources, then app compat is not needed. But if we are, then I would strongly suggest putting in app compat. I'll show you exactly in the policy how and where to do it. I hope we have established why we are doing it, because firewall is a little cagey. It becomes a little circumspect that, okay, the user is trying to set up a TLS session. I'm not exactly sure whether it's a work site or it's not a work site. I'm not exactly sure whether I should give him the access. It will just block you. Okay, so put in the app compat, put in the DRA. App compat has to be put in only if we have an entry for the cloud resource. Okay, that's a little tip and trick which would help us configure and make the policies better. The policy has been made. Now what? The policy is made, let's just say the policy is made and the end user is complaining that it's not working as per design. He is still able to copy paste data from work to personal and vice versa. He is not able to save the documents as corporate, but the policy is made very well. It's working for 10 devices, not working for the 11th, even though all the 11 users are running the same version of OS. How do we validate it? How do we troubleshoot it? The first thing, if the policy is made fine, okay, so if there are 5 users, or let's just say if there are 11 users all targeted by the same WIP policy, and all are part of the same security group, it's working for 10 of them and it's not working for the 11th one, we can pretty much rule out the possibility that there is something wrong in the policy. There is something wrong in the way the policy is configured, right? It's something to do with the way the policy is delivered, and something to do with the way the policy is behaving on the user's device. So how would we be troubleshooting that? We would be validating whether the WIP is reaching the device fine or not. How do we do that? We can do that in 3 different locations. We can validate it from the registry, we can validate it from the task manager, we can validate it from the device logs. May that be the MDM diagnostic logs, or may that be the event view logs. So in this slide, we are going to, in the upcoming slides, we're actually going to see each of them, which would help us validate in a real life scenario if WIP is not working for a specific user. These are the live steps which we would actually be taking to troubleshoot and find out why exactly WIP is not working. So enough about the theoretical stuff. Let's just now get into the practical ones. Let's just start with the registry location. Okay. So these are the registry locations. These are the 4 registry locations which are targeted by the WIP policy. And depending upon how the policy is configured in the portal, these registry values will be populated. Okay. So I would like you to, if needed, just freeze the recording, make a note of these locations, and we will actually be digging deep into each of these locations, and we will be seeing what exactly the values should be. Just remember, the values should be in accordance with the values we have set in the policy. So let's just start with the first one. HKLM software Microsoft Enterprise Data Protection Policies. First thing, please note here, guys, not only here but in all the registries, as I said in the beginning of the slides, the verbiage used is enterprise data protection and not Windows information protection. The earlier verbiage was EDP, now it is WIP. In the policy end, it has been changed to WIP, but at the device end, it still is not. Okay, so the first location is EDP policies. Let's just see what the location is supposed to contain. So if we go into my HKLM software, Microsoft EDP and policies, it has a key, a REG dword key called EDP enforcement level. So in the screen, I hope what you can see is 4 locations, and then I hope you can see the required a screenshot for required settings on the right hand side. It has got 4 options: block, allow overrides, silent, and off. What this does is, if we are setting this to block, what this would do, this would block the users from moving a data from a corporate file to a personal file. It will just give up a message saying that the action that you're performing is not authorized, you cannot do it. It will just block you right off the box. If in the policy we select allow override, then the end user's experience would be, the user would get a prompt saying that you are trying to move the data from a corporate location to a personal location. Are you sure you want to do it? He will have to click on yes, and then it will let him do it. Again, it will give a disclaimer that this is going to be blocked, guys. This is going to be logged, guys. If we click on silent, he will be able to copy paste, but it will be silently logged in the log files. We'll see exactly where it is logged later on. If it is off, then actually the EDP policy is not hitting the device. So depending upon the values that we have set in the policy, the value as in if we have selected block, allow override, silent or off, this registry value in the device is going to vary. Okay, so if from the policy we have selected allow override, if the admin in the WIP policy that he has made has selected allow override, what would be the end user experience again? The end user's experience would be if he's trying to move a file from corporate to personal, he's going to get a pop-up message saying that, are you sure you want to do it? He will be logged. You're moving a data from, you're leaking the data, you're leaking it from corporate to personal. Are you sure you want to do it? If the user clicks on yes, he will be able to move the data. It will be logged and the registry value would be 2. The EDP enforcement level value would be 2. So what I've done is in the 4 screenshots, what I've done is it has been taken from the same machine. The same policy was targeted to them, and I actually changed the WIP policy setting one by one. So first it was set as allow override from the portal, and when it was set as allow override, the EDP enforcement level value in registry was 2. When I changed it to block from the portal, when I ran a sync at the device end, the end user's experience was he was not able to copy paste. It was saying that you just cannot do it. Sorry, you don't have the option of doing it. Unlike in the previous case where it was giving him an option, in case of block, it will just block him right there. And at that point of time, if we go to the registry, the entry would be, the D word value would be 3 decimal value. If we are doing silent, the value would be 1, and if it is off, the value would be 0. Now, how exactly is this useful? Let's just say that we had again 11 users. It's working for 10 of them. For the 11th one, it is not giving him the pop-up and it is letting him do a copy paste from corporate to personal. Everything is working fine. The WIP policy is hitting the device. The first thing that we would check is we'll go to HKLM software Microsoft EDP policies, and we will be checking the value of EDP enforcement level registry key, and we will be seeing if it is set to 2. If it is not exactly set to 2, if it is in accordance with what is set in the device, what is set in the other devices and what is set in the policy. So if all the other users are getting a prompt saying, that is if in the policy we have selected allow override, and all the other 10 users are getting a prompt, or all the other users are getting blocked, that is their EDP value is 2 or 3. For this user, if he's not getting a prompt and if he's able to move the data from corporate to personal, the first thing we would check is whether the EDP enforcement level is changing over here or not, meaning whether the policy is hitting the device or not, and whether the policy is making this change to the device or not. So there might be a scenario wherein the policy is hitting the device, everything is checking out, but just this setting in the device is not changed. If everything is fine and if this is not set properly in the device, still it won't work. The WIP, even though WIP is encrypting the device, the end user's experience will not be what it is supposed to be. So this is ideally what we would be checking in user's device if the user is not getting that prompt, depending upon whether the other users are getting or not, and depending upon how exactly the policy is set at the portal level. Okay, moving on. The next location is HKLM software Microsoft provisioning evaluator post-process EDP. So when we are making a policy, over there we have an option of turning the EDP icon as on or off in the policy itself. So all we have to do is go into the app configuration policy, go into the advanced settings tab. It has been highlighted in the right hand side, as you can see in the screen. We have to go into the advanced setting tabs, and over there we have an option of showing the enterprise data protection icon as on or off. If it is turned as on, then the end user's experience would be, if they are trying to save a document in an enlightened application which has been targeted by the WIP, he is going to get the option of saving it as personal or corporate. And once he decides to save it as corporate, it's going to display a lock icon. We are going to see that later on, how exactly that lock icon looks. So that lock icon is actually the enterprise data protection icon. What that signifies is that this data has been saved as a corporate data. And if that lock icon is turned, if the EDP protected icon is turned as off in the portal, they will not be able to see the lock icon. So if it is on and the policy is hitting the device, where exactly would it target it in the registry? We have to go to this location, HKLM software Microsoft provisioning evaluators post-process EDP, and in the EDP state, as it has been highlighted in the screen, in the state it has to show EDP on. If EDP on showing over here, means that the users will be able to see the briefcase icon. If the EDP icon over here is as EDP is off, then the users will not be able to see the briefcase icon. So let's just say that we have 10 users who are able to see the EDP icon, a briefcase icon, and 11th user is not able to. The first thing, we will go into the portal and we will check whether the EDP icon is at on or off. If it is at on, then we will go into the machine of that 11th user and check this setting, whether his EDP icon, EDP value is on or off. If it is off, we can turn it on and then it should work. Another setting over here is the one we can see, that EDP policy. If we are provisioning any WIP policy from an MDM, it will be as 1. If we are not, then it will be as 0. Okay. All right. So guys, before I move on to the next slide and show other registry, there's just one thing which I would like you guys to understand. As I have already said, whatever policies we are setting in the portal and whatever registry values we are seeing in the device, they both correlate. So if we are expecting the policy to behave the way it has been set in the portal, then the policy, when it is hitting the device, will have to populate the registry entries accordingly as well. If the policy is made fine and if the registry entry for some reason is not populated, then it is similar to the policy not being made that way, right? So what I'm trying to say is that we have to, the task over here as an admin is making sure that the device ends registry setting is in accordance with whatever policy we have set in the portal. One way of changing that would be probably, if let's just say that for 10 devices the policy is changing, the policy is working fine, the experience is as required and as needed, but for the 11th user it is not. Then if we eventually end up figuring out that for that 11th user the registry was not populated, one of the ways of troubleshooting that would be probably re-enrolling the device and doing a sync and trying to figure out why exactly, and trying to make sure that the registry key gets populated automatically, or we can actually try to manually populate it, and that would work as well. So it depends if it's just one device. I mean, if we just want to make the WIP work, we can just change it in one device or n number of device manually in accordance with what the policy is set at the portal level, and it will work. If we are trying to figure out why exactly it didn't populate automatically once the device got the WIP policy, there is a different route to that. But if you are just trying to make the WIP work on one device, and because if there are 11 devices targeted by the same policy, 10 are working, 11th is not, then obviously it's not a portal issue, it's the device issue, right? The device is not getting that policy, and maybe it has got to do something with the way the device is communicating with the service side, but it's obviously not the way the policy has been configured. So to make that work, one of the route is making that manual change in the registry. And to make that manual change in the registry, we actually will have to know what change to make and where the change has to be made, right? So this is where these slides will be coming in handy. These information will be coming in handy. Okay, moving forward, the next location would be handy location would be HKLM software, Microsoft Policy Manager, current devices data protection. Over here in the portal, if we have an option of enabling Azure RMS as well, ARMS or AIP as well. As I said in the previous slides, AIP and WIP is something which works in tandem. AIP is something which we would be enabling, let's just say if we want to restrict the movement of data outside the organization, right? So we'll be making it, what we'll be doing is we'll be making an AIP policy and use that template and link it to the WIP policy, right? If we have done that and still it is not working, then we will come to this location in the device and see if the allow Azure RMS for EDP value is set as 1 or 0. If it is set as 1, that means that the value is set fine. If it is set as 0, even though we have enabled it in the policy, that means that the device is not able to understand it. We might have to manually change it. Data recovery certificate. If we have, okay, so in the bottom of the screen, you can see this screenshot was taken from the policy. So when we are making the policy, we have a tab wherein we can upload the DRA certificate. So if we have uploaded the DRA certificate, how can we actually confirm that the DRA certificate is reaching the device or not? We will come to this location and check the REG binary value for the data recovery certificate, whether the value is populated or not. I tried to find out and make a sense of the value inside this registry key. It was not exactly the thumbprint of the certificate, but just make sure that this value is actually populated. If the value is not populated, then the DRA is not actually effective. So this is something which has to be populated as well. The last thing is enterprise protected domain names. So enterprise protected domain names will be populated with all the entries that we are putting in the protected domain and all the entry that is there in the corporate identity of the policy. So when we are making a WIP policy, it by default takes up the corporate identity, which is the default protected domain, right? That is going to come up over here. In my case, it is nuggetlabs.onmicrosoft.com. That is my corporate identity. But I have added my on-prem domain in the protected domains because it's also a protected location. So that is going to get populated over here as well. If we have any child domains, I would encourage you to enter those in the protected domains as well. It will get populated over here as well. Please note that whatever we enter in the protected domains are pipe separated. Okay, so if we have multiple entries, separate them via a pipe. So enterprise protected. So let's just how exactly is this information useful in troubleshooting. Let's just say that, well, the user is doing everything right, everything what we have seen until now is working fine, but still WIP is not working. Well, we'll have to see whether this device is actually recognizing what is a protected domain and what is a unprotected domain or not. Maybe this device is not having this value in its registry populated. If it is not, the device has no way to know which is a protected location, which is not a protected location. Therefore, there's a very good amount of chance that the device might not actually give us the option of saving the document as a protected as a corporate document, even though every other setting is fine. So enterprise protected domain names, please make sure that it is populated with the corporate identity and the protected domains. Corporate identity is something which is populated by default, and protected domains are the other protected domains which we might wanna enter. I would suggest putting in your on-prem domain and all the other child domains in your on-prem. Okay, all right, moving on. The next location is HKLM software, Microsoft Policy Manager, current devices, network isolation. So this is also one of the other locations which we might wanna take a look. So as I said, cloud resources. So when we are making a policy, so if let's just take a look over the screenshot which is at the bottom of the screen first. This is from the portal, and then according to whatever we set in the portal, we will see how it correlates with the value in the registry. Okay, so in the portal, if we go to client tabs, app protection policy, we go to advanced settings, we create a policy, go to its app settings, and then select the application, and then go to the advanced settings, and then we enter the network boundary. Okay, so there are vaguely 4 or 5 kinds of network boundaries that can be added. It can be a protected domain, it can be a cloud resource, it can be a network domain, it can be a IPv4 range, it can be a proxy range, or it can be a neutral resource. So vaguely six or more. So let's just see them one by one. So cloud resource. So cloud resource is something which we will be adding in the network boundary in the advanced tab of the WIP policy. What would we be adding in the cloud resource? We will be adding anything which we want to be protected anything which we would like to get protected by WIP as a location, like SharePoint. So we can put in domain name .sharepoint.com, domain name -mysharepoint.com, domain name .sharepoint. I mean, it has been illustrated in the screenshot. So if we are saying that the SharePoint location or the OneDrive location for all my users in my organization is a protected location, meaning all the files in that location are going to be protected, they are going to be saved as corporate, and if anybody tries to open it and tries to copy data to a personal file, he will not be able to. If anybody tries to download a file from this location, it will be downloaded as a protected file. If we want to achieve that, then in the network boundary, cloud resources, we will have to add SharePoint or OneDrive or whatever needs to be added. And how exactly will it correlate with the setting in the device? It will go to the current device network isolation key of the registry, and in the enterprise cloud resource, it is going to populate with everything we have added in the cloud resource. Whatever we add in the IP range is going to be added in the enterprise IP range. So let's just say that we have file servers in our environment. We want to say that whosoever is uploading files to that file server should get uploaded as a work document. We will have to add the IP address of those file servers over here. Once we have added that, let's just say that the end user experience is he's still not able to download the file as protected from the IP range, or he's not able to download files from SharePoint, or he's not able to view the files in SharePoint as protected. What could be the cause? the cause could be these settings are not populated correctly in his device. So we can probably go to, so the best way and the best approach of troubleshooting this would be first finding out whether it is with one user or with all the users. If it's one user, then there's a good amount of chance that it has got to do something with the way the policy is hitting the device. I'm just repeating it again and again because it will help us identify the approach here. If it is with all the users, obviously the policy needs to be looked upon first. But if it's just with one user, then we can have a working log and a non-working log, as in get hold of a device which is working, open up the registry, get hold of a device which is not working, open up the registry. Now, depending upon what the user is seeing, we will actually find out how exactly is it configured in the portal. Like, for example, if the user is not able to see that EDP icon, or if the user is not able to download a file from SharePoint as protected, we know where exactly it is configured in the policy. And if we know where exactly it's configured in the policy, we know where exactly it is supposed to hit in the registry. So we will go to that setting in the registry, in the working as well as in the non-working machine, and we will compare, and we will find out whether both the entries are same or not. Well, I mean, if everything else is configured fine, then we will actually see that they are not. So we can probably make that change manually and see if it's working or not. It should. And then we can probably push a PowerShell script for also all those devices to target the registry location, or we can actually try to figure out why exactly it's not working for them. Okay. So yeah, enterprise proxy servers, same thing. We put it in the policy. This is where we see it, and we have to make sure that it has been populated. Enterprise network domain names. So enterprise network domain names is the values which are under network domains, and it is the values which is returned by our DNS, our on-prem DNS. So let's just say that we have a domain, we have a child domain, and we have a tree hierarchy in our AD, and our end user's device is joined to one of the domains. So I would suggest entering all the domains in the network domain tab in the policy, and this is where it will correlate. So let's just say that we have a user who is working fine in one domain. For all the users it's not working fine in the other domain. We'll probably see whether all the domain related information is entered in the network domain tab or not, and if it is, then whether it's populated over here or not. Okay, hope that makes sense. Now, registry is fine. Before registry, what else other than registry, what else can we check? We can generate the MDM diagnostic logs in the device as well. How to do that? Go on any device which is enrolled, go to settings, go to access work or school, click on the if a connection has, if the device is enrolled, then you'll have to click on that connection. Over there it gives us two options, info and disconnect. Obviously if we disconnect, the device will be unenrolled. That's not what we are trying to do. So we will click on info, we will scroll down, and over there it will give us an option saying export. And if we click on export, what it actually does, it exports an MDM diagnostic logs. It will give you the location where exactly it's exporting it. It's probably under C drive. C drive users, your app data temp, your profile, so to speak. So you'll have to go to that profile, and over there we can see the MDM diagnostic logs. So this is a screenshot that I took from one of my device which was targeted by the WIP policy, and I generated the MDM diagnostic logs. So as I have been saying this over and over again, I would like to repeat, whatever policy we have set on the portal, if we want that to be effective on the user's end, it has to be in tandem with what we are seeing in the registry and what we are seeing in the logs. So the logs should show, the MDM diagnostic logs will show all the policies that are hitting the device, not just WIP, but all the policies. Okay, so let's just say that the policy has been configured one way. In the policy, we have configured 10 settings, but the MDM diagnostic logs is showing only 5 of them. That means we can be pretty much sure that the other 5 will not be working. We can be pretty much sure that the other 5's registry keys will not be populated. So this is the first thing actually that we can check, the MDM diagnostic logs. So I made a policy. I showed you the settings of that policy, which we have discussed earlier. And this is a MDM diagnostic log from a device which has been targeted by the same policy. Okay, so how exactly the MDM diagnostic logs look? Over here we can see the first thing that I have highlighted is data protection, EDP show icon, current value is 1, because in my policy I have set that the data protection icon should be on, meaning that the briefcase icon should come up, or the lock icon should come up, and we already know where it should be in the registry. And the registry we have already seen that it was as 1. Okay, the next one is allow Azure RMS for EDP. I did not turn it on, therefore it was not as 1. If we turn it on, it will be as 1. Okay, we uploaded a DRA certificate. In the policy we know how to do it. I mean we had a screenshot of where to do it. I'll be showing it on later on. If it has been enabled in the policy, then the MDM diagnostic logs will also be showing the data recovery agent has been uploaded, and we already know where we have to go in the registry of the device to see whether the DRA certificate has been uploaded or not. Enterprise protected domain names, we already know it's the primary domain as well as what we have under the corporate identity. So we know how to set it in the portal. We know that it's hitting the device because we can see that the MDM diagnostic log is showing it, and we already know that where we have to go into the registry to see where it has been populated. Same thing goes with enterprise cloud resource. You can see enterprise network domain names, you can see enterprise IP range, you can see the proxy server. So whatever we have set in the policy has and whatever we are able to see in the MDM diagnostic logs has to be in tandem, has to be in coordination with each other, as in whatever we are pushing from there should be over here, and whatever is over here should be in the registry. If anywhere in the line, in the process, if things are broken, the device will not show the trait. Therefore, if it's for multiple users, we will probably skip checking the policy at first, though it's a good idea if you check the policies to begin with, because we are an Intune admin. So we can check the policy. If things are fine, we will check the logs from if it's not working in one of the devices, and probably the log will suggest that as well. And then in the non-working device, we already know where in the registry we have to go to check whether the relevant entry has been populated or not. Right? Okay, moving on. Now let's just take a look over the event logs. I have a device, my device is enrolled, and now I am targeting this device via a WIP policy. So what is the flow of the logs is what we will be trying to understand on this slide. How exactly things are processed and how exactly things are logged. Okay, so what we have to do is, in the end user's device, we have to open up event viewer, and we have to go to the application and services logs, Microsoft, Windows, data management, enterprise diagnostic provider. So device management, enterprise diagnostic provider. So device management, enterprise diagnostic provider is the key which has almost all of the WIP policies logged here. So let's just track the flow. As you can see, there are 3 screenshots in chronological order. The first one was the one which we saw first at 7:28:08 a.m. The second one is just after that. The third one is 7:28:10 a.m. just after that. So it's in chronological order. So let's just try to understand what these logs mean. So these logs have been taken from a device which has just been enrolled and has a WIP policy targeted to it. Okay, so once it has just been enrolled, first we will be able to see logs related to its enrollment, which I am skipping. So I'm only talking about the flow of the logs for WIP once the WIP policy hits the device for the first time, maybe just after enrollment, or maybe after enrollment whenever the policy has been pushed by the admin. So the first thing, obviously, if the device was never enrolled or if the device was never targeted by the WIP policy, then obviously its EDP state would be off. Okay, so that's the first thing that we can see. EDP state is off. The first screenshot, if you can see, the event ID is 1651, and it says that if you can see in the generals over there, it says that Windows information protection dependency check result, dependency name is EDP policy, the state is EDP off pending, is dependency satisfied, it's giving us a result. What this means is, when the device is enrolled or when the policy is being pushed, the device periodically does the dependency check, wherein it checks what is the current status of the EDP and what is the supposed status of the, what is the expected status of the EDP, judging by the values that has been set in the portal, depending upon the values that it is getting from the portal, as in whatever we are able to see in the enterprise diagnostic log is what is hitting the device. So initially the EDP icon was off, and when the device was enrolled or when the policy was pushed, the device actually did a dependence check. It did a dependence check, found out that its value was off, but it needs to be on because we have set a policy and the policy is now hitting the device, and the MDM diagnostic logs are also showing it. So the second thing would be the state change of EDP. You can see over there the second screenshot, event ID is 1653. It says MDM evaluator scenario, evaluator result. EDP's previous state was EDP off pending. Now its last state and the final state is EDP on, and the operation was successfully completed. So event ID is 1653. Once the dependency check was done, the computer realized that, okay, there is a policy. The policy says that EDP has to be turned on. It will turn on the EDP icon. It will turn on the EDP value. We have already seen in the portal, in the registry, where exactly it's turned on. We already know from where to turn it on the portal, and this will be the log. Okay, fine, it's done. What if we run a sync again? If we run the sync in the device again by going into access worker school and then info and then run a sync, it's going to again do a dependency check. And what is the current status? The current status is EDP on pending. So the current status is on, but the evaluation is pending. So it is going to evaluate it. Therefore, it says that EDP on pending. It's going to evaluate it depending upon what the policy has been set. If the policy has now been changed, it will change from the next log would be the previous value is EDP on pending and the current value is EDP off. If we have not changed the policy, then the log would show previous state is EDP on pending, the current value is EDP on. So every time we run a sync, or even every time the device checks in with the Intune portal, it is going to actually toggle between EDP on pending, EDP on. And then again, when the dependency check is run, it will again become EDP on pending until until it is evaluated, and then it will become EDP on. So this will keep on toggling between EDP on and EDP on pending and EDP, depending upon every time the device runs a sync or every time the device checks in, and it tries to evaluate over here. It does a dependency check and it tries to evaluate. So if it's EDP on pending or EDP on in the event log, it actually means that the EDP is hitting, the enterprise data protection is working on the device, and the device periodically is checking whatever, if a sync is run, the device is manually checking that. So this would actually be a ideal flow if, let's just say that we are able to see error messages in the device. We manually enroll the device now, it has a WIP policy targeted to it, and we are able to see error messages. What those error messages would signify is that the EDP, if the EDP icon is not turned on by default, then we can probably come to the event viewer, we can probably change it manually. Before changing it manually, we can actually come to the event viewer and we can actually see that why exactly is it not turning on. Okay, all right, moving on. The task manager. This is something basic which probably we might want to do right at the very beginning. So let's just say that I have opened Excel files and Notepad and Microsoft Edge and whatnot and whatnot, and they were all protected. So if we open up the task manager and go to the enterprise content, then it shows which files are running under the personal content and which files are running under the protected content. So if there is a file from where we are able to do the copy paste, we will actually have to see whether that file is running under the corporate content or whether it's running under context or whether it's running under the personal context. So all you have to do is go to the task manager, go to the details, just right click on that upper ribbon, and from there by default I believe the enterprise context is not selected. You have to select the enterprise context to add that column, and once it has been added, it will actually show that, let's just say in this case we can see that Excel is running, and it is actually showing my corporate identity, that is nuggetlabs.onmicrosoft.com, and it is actually showing that this application is enlightened. Okay, what else can we see? Once the device is once the file is saved, it actually shows the file ownership. So over here on the other screenshot, on the right hand side, first screenshot, we can see that there are two documents which has been saved as corporate, and the file ownership for both those files is nuggetlabs.onmicrosoft.com. Right, so if the file ownership is not corporate, that means that the file was not successfully saved as corporate, right? And we can also see that there are two icon, there's that briefcase icon or a lock icon, whatever you may call it, in that device, in that file as well, which signifies that the file was saved as corporate. And where else can we see whether the WIP is hitting the device or not? Would be, we can go to access work or school, scroll down, and over there it actually shows all the policies that are hitting the device. One of them has to be a data protection policy. So just to wrap it up, there are 10 devices working fine, part of the same security group. 11th device not working fine. How obviously the policy is fine. How exactly would we find out whether the device is fine, whether the device is getting the policies or not, and how exactly would we find out where exactly things are falling apart is, firstly, we will see the instance of that application in the task manager and see whether it's running under the enterprise context or not, and whether the files that the users are saving, they are getting saved under the file, under what file ownership. We can see whether it's showing under the policies as data protection or not. We've already seen the flow of event for event viewer, We can see whether these checks are happening or not, on whether in this location there are any error files or not. We can run and generate an EDP diagnostic report and actually see if whatever has been configured in the policy is even actually hitting the device or not for the 11th device. Maybe it's not even hitting the device, and therefore it's not populated in the registry, and therefore it's not working. So we will see over here, and then these are the registry settings which we can see. We have already discussed them. These are the registry settings. I was just scrolling back and just showing you these are the registry settings which you would actually see, and make sure that they are in accordance with whatever has been set in the policy. Okay, all right. Now let's just do a little play with WIP. I just wanted to do a little demo of the auto recovery feature. So you remember we said that if user is using a device which has been encrypted by WIP, and that device was encrypted, and not the device, all the data in the device was encrypted using the EFS key, and the EFS key was encrypted by using user's RSA, and the RSA went missing, or the user unenrolled the device, and the RSA went missing. User had to go to the DRA. DRA was someone who was able to unencrypt the file. Earlier on there was a DRA, now there is a DRA agent. Now there is not a specific person, but a person who has the DRA agent certificate is the DRA. And then we talk about what the auto recovery is. Like if a user unenrolled his device, all his corporate data were inaccessible, it was giving them an access is denied error. When he enrolled it again, he was able to access the device. So let's just see a demo of that. This device was enrolled to Intune. Okay, the user mistakenly unenrolled it. So in that access work or school screenshot, you can see that under connect there is no account associated with it, meaning that the device is currently no longer enrolled to Intune. Correct? The second screenshot on the left of it, you can see when we are trying to open a text document named test dog, it is saying that you do not have the permission to open this file. See the owner of the file or an administrator to obtain permission. This file, we were able to open this file when we were connected to the domain, when this device was enrolled to Intune. When we are checking the file ownership for those two files, important and test, we can see that the file ownership is currently revoked, and it's giving me the corporate identity. So the file ownership is now revoked because the WIP policy was not removed. The WIP policy was working, and suddenly the user unenrolled the device. Had the WIP policy been removed, the file would it would not show revoked. But in this case, we have removed the enrollment. You can also see that there is that lock icon or the briefcase icon, but it has grayed out a little. Okay, so these are the things that is actually showing us that the device was mistakenly unenrolled. Now what to do? Now we can take these files to the DRA and have them unencrypted, or do what I'm going to do next. So just look at the timestamp at the right hand side of the screen. At 11:37 a.m. my timing, the device was unenrolled, and moments later at 11:43 I enrolled the device again, and just see what has happened. Now both those two files, important and test doc, they are no longer revoked. Now both those two files, the briefcase icon is no longer grayed out. Now when I'm trying to open the file, it's no longer giving me excuse me, it's no longer giving me access is denied error. And just to prove that I have enrolled the device again, and that this is when I saw this, we went back into the access work or school, and there's a screenshot of that which is a little jaded, but it has been connected again. Okay, so I enrolled the device again using the same UPN. I did not have to go back to the DRA again or get in touch with my PKI team and have the files again. everything restored. This is the auto recovery feature, because once the device is re-enrolled using the same UPN, the keys that were used to encrypt is actually back with the Azure AD account. It flows back to the device. So there's that. And excuse me. So moving on, what I did again was, just for demonstration purpose, I unenrolled the device again. When I first I enrolled the device was targeted by a WIP, and I made the document named test, the first one which we can see. Then I unenrolled the device. Therefore that test document became not accessible. It started giving us that you don't have permission. And then I enrolled the device again, but this time I enrolled it using a different UPN. So a different user enrolled the device. So right now you can see that this device is enrolled, because you can see that test2 is a protected doc, and in this the briefcase icon is not grayed out, it's not jaded away, which proves that this device is still enrolled and is getting the WIP policy. So I made another document named test2. On the right hand side you can see that it is the briefcase icon is there, meaning that this device is protected. So the point that this slide is trying to illustrate is, a device was enrolled, then the device was unenrolled. Once the device was unenrolled, all the corporate data were inaccessible. And once the device was enrolled again using a different UPN, WIP started working for that user, but the previous user's files were still not accessible, meaning that if you enroll the device again using the same UPN, only then your keys will flow back to the device and unencrypt the existing files. If you enroll using a different UPN, this further proves that if you are enrolling using a different UPN, then those files which were encrypted by anyone else's keys are still not going to be accessible. Okay. So this was just a small demonstration that the same user needs to enroll the device again, and the key will again flow in. Okay. Now let's just take a look at one more log. So in the policy we were able to see that in the WIP policy it was giving us 4 options: block, allow override, silent, or off. And depending upon whatever selections we were making over here, we already know that how it was affecting the value in the registry. So let's just say that we selected on allow override from the policy. What would the end user's experience would be? The end user is trying to move a content of a file named test2, which is work protected, to a file which is named not important. He is copying a text and he is pasting over there. The policy has been set saying allow override. What is the end user's experience? The end user's experience is, it gives him a pop-up saying that your organization might track this action. Are you sure you want to do it? Are you sure you're leaking a data? Are you sure you want to do it? If you do it, it will be logged. The admin will find out about this because I have done an allow override. If he still does that, it's going to be logged. Where exactly is that logged? It is logged in Event Viewer, Application and Services, Logs, Microsoft, Windows, EDP audit regular and audit TCB. This is the location. And how exactly does that log look? The log looks like this. You can see the timestamp. If we go to the generals, it's going to say that text has been copied. We did a copy paste from whatever the location is, the canonical name of that location. For the application, that is notepad.exe, which was tagged as my corporate identity, to another file, which in this case is also notepad, which was tagged as blank. So that was a personal file. So what this is showing is that the data has leaked. Somebody has done a copy paste from a file which was tagged as corporate to a file which was not tagged as corporate. And this is happening because we have the WIP policy in place. So that is the first place wherein it's going to mark that, do that logging, depending upon how we have configured the WIP policy. Now let's just say that I open up a corporate data and go to save as, and I save it as a personal one. Again, it's going to give us that prompt, and then how exactly is it going to log it? It is going to say that unknown data has changed. It's going to give us a location. In this case, what I did was I changed a Excel file from corporate to personal. So it is saying that excel.exe tagged as my corporate identity, it has been changed to again excel.exe tagged as my personal. What this means is the user changed a Excel file from corporate to personal, change the identity, and this is exactly what the log is showing. Again, the location is the same. The location is EventViewer, Application and Services Logs, Microsoft Windows, EDP Audit Regular, and EDP Audit TCP. So guys, that's pretty much about what I wanted to share as far as troubleshooting and the working of WIP is concerned. So I know that we have had enough of theoretical exposure to this. So now let's just move into the practical stuff of it. So as I've already shown, this is my Intune portal, and let me just let's just quickly walk over the policies again. So let's just go to client apps and then the app configuration policy. So I'm sorry, app protection policy. Okay, this is where we have to be. I mean, the name signifies here. We are at Microsoft Intune. We are talking about WIP policy. We already know that it's kind of a MAM policy. Therefore, obviously, it's not going to be in device enrollment, configuration, or compliance. It's related to the application, right? So it has to be under client apps. Now, we are protecting the data. We are not pushing, we are not configuring the data, configuring the application in any way, right? We are protecting the data inside the application. Therefore, it has to be under app protection policy. So the name signifies here. So this is the policy that we have. Just a quick overview once again. After that, what we are going to do is we are going to enroll a device and see how exactly it's behaving. So in the general, the name of the policy, assignments, the policy has to be assigned to if you are assigning it to a user, it has to be assigned to a security group. There is a security group called demo in my environment. It has a username demo inside of it. Protected apps, I have added each and everything. We will see how exactly it behaves. Exempted, I have not exempted anything. Okay, just one quick thing in protected, if I click on add apps, it actually gives me the option of adding the apps. By default, out of the box, Microsoft recommends few applications. It's there in the recommended apps. I can even add store apps or desktop apps as well. For that, I'll have to add the publisher name and whatnot. So we can refer to the documentation for that, which would give us all those information. So I can exempt the apps as well. As I said, in the required settings, if the user is trying to move the data of a protected application to an unprotected application, what behavior should he expect? Should it give him an allow override? Should it give him a prompt saying that, okay, hey, you're leaking the data, you should not, are you sure you want to? That's override block would just tell him that you're leaking the data, you're not allowed to. Silent would not give anything, it would just log it seamlessly at the back end. And off means the WIP policy is not currently active. That's the corporate identity right there. It's my default corporate identity, that is my tenant extension. But if I have any primary domains, I would probably be adding it under cloud resources. So let's go to advanced settings, and over here, these are the settings, these are the settings that we were discussing earlier. So let's start from the bottom. Azure RMS, I'm not turning it on, therefore it's still off. Enterprise data protection icon, I have turned it on. This is that briefcase icon or that lock icon that we see over there. DRA certificate, we can upload a DRA certificate over here. Right now there is no DRA certificate uploaded in this policy. However, the policy that I have applied, it has the DRA certificate applied uploaded to it. Protected domains, I will enter my on-prem domain over here. If I have any child domains as well, I will be entering that as well. Cloud resources, it is by default auto-populated with SharePoint related sites. Please note that cloud resources are pipe separated. Don't separate them by comma. And if we are separating any location that is where in the cloud, then we have to add the entry for cloud resources. In this case, we can add SharePoint, we can add OneDrive or whatnot. As we are adding location in cloud resources, app compact is necessary because, as I said, Windows Firewall a little cagey, can't decide whether to let you go or not. If you are establishing a TLS session, then it might just block you. Therefore, this app compact. Okay, IPv4 ranges. My file servers and all the servers are in this range, therefore I have put in 192.168.0.0, 192.168.255.255. All the DNS server queries are all the replies that we get from our DNS server. This will be what we'll be entering in the network domain. For example, let's just say that we have a primary domain, then a child domain, and then if we have a hierarchical structure, then we have many we have different domains in child parent kind of a configuration. In that case, if it's working for a user in one domain but it's not working for him in the other domain, if there is a trust relationship between the both, in that case we have to ensure that all the requests response that we are getting from the DNS is entered over here. In my case, I don't have any hierarchy, it's just one domain, therefore it's the same thing which I have pretty much entered in my protected domain as well. So it has already been assigned. So let's just now go ahead, and this is the machine which we are going to work upon. So what I'm going to do now, guys, is let me just go ahead and first enroll this device to you. Then I'll be just giving you a normal demonstration of how seamlessly WIP is supposed to work. And then we will try to do the auto recovery thing as well. And we'll see how it goes. So if you remember the WIP data flow, the first thing that we are doing over here is we are enrolling the device, and once the device is enrolled, it is going to get the WIP policies along with the other policies. So the process of enrolling it is the same: access, work or school, connect, and then I will be entering the ID. Once it's in the process of getting enrolled, I will explain how exactly it works at the backend. So demo@nuggetlabs.onmicrosoft.com. Okay, it's going to ask me for my on-cloud username and password. That's my password. Just enter it. It's a test account. You guys can see it. Okay, so now let's just wait for the message to come up, and then probably that will answer all our questions. Okay, hold on while we register this device to your company and apply the policy. So let's just take a pause here. Let's just get off track a little and go to Azure Active Directory Blade. Let's just go to Mobility, MDM and MAM, Microsoft Intune. This is actually the scope. So if we are talking about Windows 10 devices, so the flow is, once we go to access, work or school, and once we enter our credentials, and if that user has the EMS license, his device is going to get enrolled eventually. But the thing that happens before it gets enrolled is his Windows 10 device gets Azure AD registered. So that's the first thing that happens, Azure AD registration. And if and only if the MDM scope is set to all, or the MDM scope is set to some, and the user who's trying to do the enrollment is a part of that group, only in that case, after the Azure AD registration, his device is going to get automatically enrolled to Intune. So that is actually the auto enrollment feature. That is, the user does not have to take any other action to get his device enrolled. Once his device is Azure AD registered, it seamlessly gets enrolled to Intune at the backend. However, all the users might not actually want to use it. What if they don't have the EMS license assigned to them? You might just want to Azure AD register the device and make use of, let's just say, conditional access, which is an Azure feature, not an Intune. You don't need to enroll your device to Intune to make use of conditional access, right? But the device needs to be in the device needs to be registered in Azure to make use of it, right? If you're applying it on a device. So that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to explain what this auto enrollment feature is and from where we actually set it up. And if this is set up, then if the device is Azure AD registered, it will seamlessly get enrolled as well. If this is not set, then the user will actually have to click on that link. So during the Azure AD registration, there is a link which says enroll in device management. We will have to click on that, and only after that the device will get enrolled to Intune. That's just the basic background of what is happening when we are actually clicking on access workers code. So let's just go back to devices. If a device is Azure AD registered, it will show up over here. If the device is enrolled to Intune as well, it will show up over here. Okay, so this is my device, client WD. And now you can see that the device is being managed by MDM. So the device is now enrolled to Intune. If I see in the Azure Blade, if I look for client with D, I will be able to see it over here as well as Azure AD registered. There you go. It's the Azure AD registered device. Okay. Right now it's showing that the MDM is Microsoft Intune. MDM can be anything. When the device only gets Azure AD registered, the MDM scope is actually none. I mean, the MDM value is actually none. So right now the device is enrolled. We can go ahead and do our testing over here. I would first like to do a sync to make sure that the policies are going through. So I just initiated a sync at 9:25. Let's just minimize this. Let's just do a OK. And we can run a sync from the device as well. All we have to do is click on the info and do a sync. And you just have to wait for the sync to finish out. This is showing that the device is actually connected to an on-prem domain. This is the on-prem domain called nuggetlabs.com. And this is the credential that I have used to connect to the user account from the cloud. That is, so there are two ways you can make use of this. You can either have your user account synced from on-prem to the cloud using something like Azure AD Connect or a tool which actually syncs it. It can sync all the users, or you can create a user in the cloud itself, and you can only assign EMS license to those users, and only those users will be able to enroll the devices, right? Okay, all right, so I just ran the last sync, and okay, in the manage, I think it will show all the devices that have been enrolled. Anyways, we don't need that for now, so I think probably we can just skip it for now. So I'm just minimizing this. The sync has been done. Now it's the moment of truth. So let's just see how it looks now. Notepad. Open up the notepad. This is a test of WIP. Save it. Fingers crossed. And there you go. It is as seamless as that. User did not have to install any DLP. No changes made by the user. All he did was enroll his device, sync it a couple of times, or maybe leave it. The device will automatically sync, automatically check in, and then open up the document. This is a application which is being controlled by WIP, therefore it's giving us the option of saving it as a work protected. Therefore the user will save it as work protected. And I'm going to save this document in the desktop. I'm going to minimize this. The document is saved itself. It shows the briefcase icon. signifying that this is a protected document. This is corporate. You better be very sure when you're copying and pasting it out of it. So let's just do this. Let's just open up another notepad instance and save it in desktop again. And this time I am saving it as personal doc. Wonderful. Now let me open the personal doc again. I was just editing it. Editing line 1. Oops. Line 1. Line 2. Oh. I was just copying it casually and I just pasted it mistakenly into the personal doc. What happens? Whoop. The ownership of this content will be changed from work to personal. Your organization may track this action, signifying that the user was not aware of the data he was handling. He was not doing this intentionally. He unintentionally copied the data. Therefore, WIP is letting him know that you're leaking the data. Are you sure you want to do this? The admin will be logging it. If I do this as change to personal, only then I can copy the file. So I just saved it. One more quick thing, just going into the task manager and just wanted to show you the context in the task manager as well. And one more thing while the task manager pops up. Okay, over here we can see that the context. So this is personal and this is work protected. The personal one is not tagged as the personal one is not tagged with the corporate ID. However, the work protected document is tagged with the corporate ID, like we saw in the presentation. So let's just open the task manager once again. I apologize, my device is a little slow. You just have to give it a little time. So let's just go to more details. Okay. So over here we will have to add the column of enterprise context. By default, the enterprise context is not coming. And I'm trying to right click on it, but for some reason the right click is not working. So what ideally we will be doing is I'm just trying to see if there is a workaround. Nope, nope, nope. Let me see if I can see the process for my notepad. Okay, so right now these are the two notepad files. And okay, there you go. Resource values. Nope, this is not what I want. Publisher. Nope, this is not what I want. Type. Nope. Status. Nope. PID. Process name. Let's just add all of them. Command line. Resource values, memory disk network. Okay. Okay, I am not sure why exactly the enterprise context is not coming up. So that's why, as a fail safe, I had one more machine. So let's just see if it's coming up over here. Okay. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong place, am I? Command line, process name, enterprise context. I cannot see anything with enterprise context. However, we'll figure that out. So the point that I'm trying to make is this is running in enterprise context and this is running in personal context. So using task manager, that is something which we can figure out as it has been illustrated in the screenshot. And Okay, so we tried to copy paste the data, it didn't work. Now let's just take a look over the registry locations. So I'll be really quick when I go through the registry locations, because it is already there in the slides that we have seen. So reg edit, let's just quickly go through it. Yes, I want you to. HKLM, system, software, Microsoft. I think I'm at the wrong location. HKLM, software, Microsoft, and then enterprise data protection policies. EDP enforcement level is 2 because I have selected that option over in the portal, which we just now saw. It is configuring overrides, so allow overrides. So that actually means that the user will be prompted. So let me just quickly show you which setting I'm talking about. I'm talking about this. So this is 2, this is 3, this is 1, this is 0, I believe. Please refer to the slide for that. So that is one of them, one of the locations. The other location would be let's just quickly go through this. Okay, the other location would be software, Microsoft, policy manager, current. Software, Microsoft, policy manager, current, device, and then data protection. Let's just take a look over what are the data protection. Okay, so this is the data protection, whatever we have configured in the portal. So I have uploaded a DRA certificate in the portal, therefore it's showing us over here. I know that the policy that I was showing you did not have the DRA certificate, but the policy that is actually applied to this machine has the DRA certificate uploaded in it. So we are able to see the DRA certificate over here. Azure AIP was not turned on. Enterprise protected domains is the corporate identity as well as whatever has been added in the protected domains. So it all shows up over there. Network isolation is showing us the IP address that we have added, the cloud resources that we have added, and neutral resource, nothing has been added over there. Okay, so that's one of the things which I wanted to show you. And now I just wanted to show you guys one more quick thing. So let's just go to portal.office.com real quick. I just wanted to show you guys that how exactly entering SharePoint resources in the cloud makes a difference. So this user is going into, he's not an admin, he's an end user. He's going to SharePoint and just, okay, let's just wait for the SharePoint website to log in. And just when he goes into SharePoint, let me just open up another tab and let me just open up facebook.com probably. Okay, so over here, this is not a protected location, as you can see over here, right? Nowhere you can see any briefcase icon, but in the SharePoint location we can see that there is a briefcase icon. And if I browse over there, it says that this website is managed by nuggetlabs.microsoft.com, meaning that if I'm accessing SharePoint even via URL, even via the web browser, it is still showing that this is a protected location, guys. This is a protected location. If you download anything from here, it's going to be protected. It's going to give you the option if you want to save it as protected or if you want to save it as personnel. Okay, same thing for OneDrive. Okay, so let me just click on that real quick. Don't need the Facebook login anymore. And then, okay, let me go into the documents. I think I should have something uploaded over here. So I'm just going into the document section and then I'll try to actually download a file. So I think, yeah, I do have a notepad over here. So I would actually be downloading this file. So it should, yeah, it is giving me the option to download. I'm downloading this file, and this, I'm downloading it from a shared location. See, you can see this is a shared, even if I'm accessing it via browser, it's a shared location. So I'm doing a save as, and I'll save it in the desktop. I'm going to save it in the desktop, and there you go. It's asking us, you are trying to download a document from a protected location. It must be a protected document. Is it? If it is, you will be saving it as work. If it is not, you will be saving it as personal. So WIP is intelligent enough, and it knows that if we are trying to download or upload something from a protected location, it might very well be a protected document. Therefore, it gives us this option. So I'll save it as work, go back, minimize, and here the document has been document is protected. I'm sorry, this is the document we just now downloaded. Okay, nope, I don't want you to print it. Okay, so this is the document we just downloaded. Okay, there you go. All right, wonderful. All right, guys, so lastly, probably the last thing that I can show you guys is the auto recovery feature. I know that we already have the screenshots for that, but probably if I can just show it to you, it will be a little cool. So let's just do this. Let me just get rid of everything real quick, and then we will be unenrolling the device. So I'm going to go over here, then here, accounts, access workers, cool. I am just going to disconnect this. Okay, yes, I want to. All right, so I would suggest, let's just reboot this box, though rebooting is not required, but still I would suggest it. Let's just reboot this box. While this comes back up, let's just go back to our slides. There you go. So let's just come back to the starting. What have we discussed until now? We know what is WIP, not an Intune feature. It is something like a DLP. Well, not exactly. You know, we both know now why it is not a DLP, because it is in the OS, not on the OS like other DLPs. And why exactly we need it? It categorizes the data, keeps them in containers, tags them, gives us the option of protecting the data, protecting the leakage. If the admin revokes the device or retires the device, the work related documents are deleted, the personal documents are not deleted, even though they both were created and were linked to the same application, which was a managed application or an enterprise, an enlightened application. That I pretty much should explain why we need WIP. Now, as far as WIP goes, we should have the basic understanding of what Azure information protection is as well. WIP cannot help us in protecting the forwarding, let's just say forwarding or printing of an email, but outside the organization, but that is something which can be achieved via Azure information protection, formerly known as Azure Rights Management, and in the policy itself, we can turn it on and link it to the template. And we also understood the difference between WIP and AIP, as in AIP would, if the user is aware of what he's doing, that is when we actually make use of AIP, and it usually requires the user to take in an extra step and probably gives him a more prompt. In case of WIP, so everything is working as per design, it will not. We also discussed about the WIP data lifecycle, as in when we enroll the device, the policies flow in. When we try to download it, like we just did from SharePoint website, it was the data ingress. When we were downloading it and it knew that, oh, this is a protected location, corporate location, the file must also be corporate, therefore it's giving you the option. Then the data genesis, when we are trying to copy paste the document, it's showing us the prompt as it has been set in the policy itself. The DRA and the auto recovery, we discussed that pretty much in detail of what EFS is and what DRA is, why we need DRA, what data recovery agent is, how does auto recovery work, And a little useful tips and tricks we discussed, like DRA though is not mandatory, but I would personally very much recommend you guys putting up a DRA agent and putting up the app compat if we are putting in the SharePoint websites in the policy. And at the end, we saw how we can validate that WIP has been delivered to the device. And what the task here is making sure that whatever policy has been set is what we see in the diagnostic logs and what we see in the registry. So if all these three are in accordance, then pretty much MDM's job is done. If still WIP is not working, let's just say if still user is able to copy paste from corporate to personal, even though the policy is correctly configured, even though the MDM diagnostic logs is showing that the policy is correctly configured, even though the file ownership is work, and even though the registry location has all the correct values set, like EDP enforcement level is fine and all the other values are fine and in accordance with what was created in the profile, in the policy profile, then it is the way the device is behaving and Intune has done its job. Therefore, at that point, we will be involving the Windows networking team and having their assistance to how to take it forward. Guys, now I want to take a moment and discuss a little about enlightened and unenlightened application for WIP. It is incumbent for us to understand this as there is some gray area regarding this topic. A common perception is that an enlightened application is one which can be targeted via WIP policy and its data can be protected and managed and saved in work context. And an unenlightened application is one which cannot be targeted via WIP policy and it cannot access or create work related data. However, this is not exactly true. So I want to just take a moment and provide some clarification so that we can go through what exactly enlightened app is and what exactly unenlightened app is. So before we do that, let me just provide you background. In WIP, we classify apps into two categories. First is enlightened and the second one is unenlightened. So enlightened app is one which can differentiate between corporate and personal data, thereby giving the users an option of choosing in which context the app data is to be saved. For example, let's just say that I have applied WIP policy to an enlightened app called MS Excel. So when I'm editing that file and when I go to save that file, it gives me an option of whether I want to save it in personal context, or whether I give it in whether I want to save it in work context. So that's a typical behavior of an enlightened application. The other aspect of an enlightened application is that it has the ability of understanding the MAM policy that has been targeted onto this application. So for example, let's just say that in the policy I have defined that the leakage of data should be blocked from a managed app to an unmanaged app, and let's just say Excel is a managed app in this case. So if I open an Excel file which was saved as work, and if I copy any content from Excel to outside of Excel to another instance of Excel which was not saved as managed, or to another application which is not a managed application, then it's going to give us a prompt saying that your organization is not letting you move this data. So which is a typical behavior of an enlightened application. Thereby it doesn't give thereby it understands what the WIP policy is and it behaves accordingly. And finally, another behavior of enlightened application is that it gives the user the flexibility of using the same application in the same device for personal as well as work purpose. So well, let's just go back to our example of MS Excel. A user can use that MS Excel application in his device which is let's just say enrolled, if you're talking about with enrollment, and he can use that application for his personal purpose as well as for work related purpose. When he's using it for personal purpose, whatever documents he is going to create out of Excel, he is going to save it in the personal context, and what if he's using it for work related purpose, then whatever file he is going to create using the application will be saved in work context. So this is a basic background of what an enlightened app is and how exactly an enlightened app is going to behave. Now let's just talk about an unenlightened application. An unenlightened application is one which is not capable of understanding and comprehending the WIP policy by default. So please note here I am saying that it is not capable of understanding and comprehending the WIP policy by default. It does not mean that that an unenlightened application cannot understand WIP policy. It doesn't understand it by default. There are ways around that which we are going to talk about. However, the underlying factor which actually differentiates an enlightened app from an unenlightened app is that an unenlightened app is not going to give an user an option of saving a file in personal context as well as in work context. So by default, as I said, an unenlightened, let me just clarify this a little. By default, an unenlightened application does not understand WIP policy, and it is only going to give us an option of saving a file which has been created out of an unenlightened application in personal context. That's the normal behavior. Now, by using some twitches, if we do end up making an unenlightened application managed, which means by some twitches, if we end up applying WIP policy to an unenlightened application, then that unenlightened application though is going to understand the WIP policy, but when the user tries to save a file out of that unenlightened application, he is not going to get an option of saving it in personal as well as in work. He is only going to get an option of saving that file in work context. So he doesn't get that option. So let me just reiterate here. An unenlightened application is not an application. I mean, if somebody is saying that an unenlightened application is one which cannot be managed and which cannot be targeted via WIP policy, that is incorrect. An unenlightened application can be managed and unenlightened application can be targeted via WIP policy. By default it cannot be, and by default it isn't, but there are ways around that, and we can make an unenlightened application managed and targeted via WIP policy. The only thing which we cannot do in an unenlightened application is that an unenlightened application is not going to give us an option of saving a file which has been created from that application in personal and in work context once it has been managed. It's only going to give us an option of saving that file in work context. So now guys, let's just talk about, so as I already said, an unenlightened application can still be managed and WIP policy can still be applied to it. There are three ways. So the first way, is, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. The first way is reaching out to the app developer and making use of the Intune SDK. The first way says that we can actually develop the application again using the Intune SDK, which is going to make that unmanaged application a managed application. So obviously if we are making it a managed application, or if we are making it an enlightened application, then well obviously it's going to behave like a typical enlightened application. It's going to get managed and behave like one. So the first one is we are actually changing an unenlightened application to an enlightened application by developing it again by using Intune SDK. So well, let's just talk about the second one and the third one, which is going to make more sense. The second one is using app wrapper, using a tool called app wrapper. So let's just say that we have an unenlightened application and we want to make it managed. Then what we are going to do is we are going to use something called app wrapper, which is going to make it enlightened. Please keep in mind that an app wrapper is only applicable for iOS and Android, and using an app wrapper does not guarantee that the application will actually become enlightened, because we are just using an app wrapper tool. We are not integrating the ADL libraries inside of the application code by using something called Intune SDK. That's the second thing. The thing that I want to focus on and stress on right now is a method called using app locker files. So the first two methods actually talk about how we can make an unenlightened application enlightened application. The third method, that is using an app locker, talks about how we can make An unenlightened application, managed application. App locker, please keep in mind, it does not make an unenlightened application enlightened. App locker helps us to make an unenlightened application managed. So let's just talk about app locker a little more. uh, well, the first thing is, again, usage of app locker is not exactly foolproof. So if you are using app locker for an unmanaged app, for an unenlightened application, please notice the choice of my words here. Please notice when I'm using the word unenlightened and when I'm using the word unmanaged, because because it's not necessary that an unenlightened application will always be unmanaged. By default, an unenlightened application is unmanaged. However, if we use something called an app locker, an unenlightened application will become managed. It will not become enlightened, it will become managed. So again, using an app locker file does not guarantee that all the applications for which we have generated an app locker is going to be managed, but in most of the cases, as per my experience, it works. But please keep in mind, as I have said already many times, usage of app locker does not make an unenlightened application enlightened. It makes it managed in most of the cases, but not enlightened. So using app locker ensures that an application would be able to comprehend and understand the WIP policy, which it otherwise could not. So if the application is becoming managed, then the application is able to, when I say that an application is managed, what I mean is that an application is going to understand the WIP policy that is being targeted onto it and is going to behave accordingly. So if the WIP policy says that the movement of data should only happen between managed applications, then this application for which we have generated an app locker file is going to behave like a managed application, and we can get import data into that application from another managed application. So guys, now let's just talk about what is the advantage of using an app locker for an unenlightened application. As I already said, by using app locker, let me just reiterate, by using an app locker file, we can make an unenlightened application managed. This application will now be able to access the other managed files, and this application will now give us the ability of if we go inside this application now and create a file from inside of that application, that application can now be stored, that data can now be stored in work context. So these are the advantages. So let's just say that I had an application called Power BI, and Power BI by default is okay. I have to edit this. So we will edit this, and okay guys, just to sum it up, the conclusion from this is that an app that if you are using app wrapper, that if you are using app locker, not app wrapper, if you are using app locker for an unenlightened application, that application does not become enlightened. It just gives us the ability of saving a file from inside of that application in the work context, and it gives us the ability of making that application understand WIP policy. However, it does not give the ability, or it does not give the user an option of saving a file from inside of that application in personal as well as in corporate or in personal as well as in work context. All the files created from this application are going to be marked as corporate. So which means that it does not, that the same application cannot be used now for personal as well as for work related activities. So let's just do a comparison now. Let's just say that we have an enlightened application called Excel and an unenlightened application called Power BI. So by default, Excel was understanding the MAM policy, and by default, Power BI was not understanding the MAM policy. Now we bring App Locker into the picture, and now the unenlightened Power BI application starts understanding the WIP policy. However, it still doesn't become an enlightened application and behave 100% like an MS Excel. It understands the WIP policy like MS Excel. It behaves like a managed application like MS Excel, because we can import data from other managed application from inside into the inside of Power BI. However, MS Excel always will give you an option of saving in file in personal and work, but Power BI now, once it has been incorporated with App Locker, will only give us an option of saving files in work context, meaning everything that an unenlightened application touches after App Locker has been integrated into it is in work context. Therefore, this application cannot be used by a user in the same device for work as well as for personal purpose. However, in case of an enlightened application, it can be used. So, well, to give an example, as I said, we can use Power BI desktop application. By default, it's not an enlightened app. Power BI, by incorporating App Locker, can be managed. However, it's not enlightened, it's only managed. Now we can access other work protected Excel and work files from Power BI. So if I open a Power BI now, I can import Excel file inside of Power BI, an Excel file which was saved as work. However, when we are saving a file from inside of Power BI, so when we save a file from Power BI, it is saved with the extension .pbix. So when we save a file from Power BI, it is only going to give us an option of saving it in work once App Locker has been incorporated. It's not going to give us an option of saving it in personal and work, like an Excel or a Notepad would, because it's an enlightened application and that app can be used by the user for either of the purposes. However, an unenlightened application, when incorporated with App Locker, does not give this option to the end user.
So guys, now we are going to do a quick test and see the performance of the Power BI desktop app when it is not managed versus the performance of Power BI app when it is managed by the usage of App Locker file. Mind you, Power BI desktop app is not an enlightened app by default. So if I go to this Microsoft Docs, and it actually shows us the list of enlightened Microsoft apps for use with WIP. And over here, these are the list of applications that are currently enlightened. And as you can see, Power BI desktop app is not an enlightened app out of the box. So if we go to a app policy, if I make a WIP policy, and if I go to the protected apps list, and if I do a add app, I won't be able to see Power BI in this list. So meaning that Power BI is not a protected app, is not a managed app, and we should not be able to apply WIP policy onto this application out of the box. But again, there is a way around it, and the way around it is application of is the usage of app locker file. So what we are going to do is we are going to enroll a machine, and then on that machine we are going to install Power BI application and then see the behavior of Power BI application when it is not managed versus behavior of Power BI application when it is managed by the use of app locker file. So what I did was I created a basic demo WIP policy. So let me just walk you guys through the WIP policy that I've created. Nothing fancy here. This is the name assignment. It has been assigned to a group. In the protected apps, I have selected the Office Suite, Internet Explorer, Microsoft Paint, and Notepad. Exempted apps, I have not selected anything. The required setting is I want to block the leakage of data outside the managed application. And in the advanced settings, I have just turned on the EDP icon. Okay. After this, I enrolled a Windows 10 machine to my tenant. This is the machine I enrolled. Let me just run a quick sync. So this is the machine that has been enrolled, and this is all that I have done until now. This is the machine that I'm talking about. So let me just show you guys how exactly the machine is behaving. So Let me just show you guys the host name, and then I'm going to, okay, host name. So this is the name of the machine that I'm going to do the current testing on, which matches. So there you go. So let me just do this. Let me just open up the notepad file over here and show you guys that WIP policy is actually taking effect. So testing WIP. Let me just save this file on the desktop, and if WIP is getting applied, we should get the yeah, there you go, the EDP icon. So I'm going to save this file as a work protected file, that is as a managed file on the desktop. Okay, I know my machine is running a little slow. So work one, let me just call it work one, testing WIP one, testing WIP 2. Okay, so I've just saved this file. You can see that there is this icon showing that the file is managed. If I close this over here also, you can see that there is that icon showing that the file is managed. Let me just open up an Excel file, and while the machine was getting enrolled, I actually took the liberty of installing the Power BI desktop application onto this device. It's a free application, so all we have to do is go to Google and download the Power BI desktop app, which is easily available. So I have already installed that application onto this device. Other than that, no other configurational change has been made. So let me just do this. Let me just launch the Power BI desktop application. So the Power BI desktop application is now getting launched. So there you go. Power BI desktop app is currently getting launched. So let's just give it a moment while the Power BI launches, and then we will take a look. So let's just discuss what's going to be the ideal behavior. So if I have created a text file which is work protected, or if I have created an Excel file which is work protected, then I should not be able to import this text file and Excel file inside the Power BI desktop application, because uh, currently Power BI desktop app is not a managed app, and we have blocked the leakage of data from a managed application, that is Notepad, to an unmanaged application, that is Power BI desktop. So that should be the ideal behavior right now. So let's just see how exactly it goes. Meanwhile, let's just open up Excel, because Excel is also an managed application, and let's just create a couple of managed files from Excel so that we can actually try and import these files and inside the Power BI application and see how it exactly looks. All right, so the Excel file has opened up. So let me just do this. Over here you can see that I'm logged into the Excel. I'm logged into Office using the credentials that were used to enroll this machine. So let me just create a text document over here and then put in some data, and then we will try and import it inside of the Power BI application. So all right, let me just put in some uh, blank values in here, just so that we can import it in the form of a graphical or pictorial representation. That's all. Okay, so we are all good here. So now let's just try and save this file. So again, when we are trying to save an Excel file, it should give us the option of saving it as a work context, saving it in the work context, or saving it in the personal context. So that is one of the default behaviors of managed application. The managed application always gives us the option, always gives the option to the end user whether they want to save a file which has been created in this application in personal context or in work context. On the other hand, an unenlightened application, if it has been made managed via the use of app locker, it is not going to give you that option, and we are going to see that in a while. If only my machine was any faster. But it's okay, we'll get through this. Okay, there you go. It's now giving me the option of saving this file, and rightly so. Over here you can see that we have an option of either saving it in the personal context or in the work context. So I'm going to go to desktop, and I am going to save this as book 1. Okay, so I just did a save, and the file is saved now. Let me just open up a Excel file in the desktop itself. Microsoft Excel worksheet. This worksheet is going to be personal and not corporate. Okay, so it has opened now. Let me just make this same kind of a data. So let me just do a Control S. Let's just do a save as. Let's just browse, and let me just go to desktop, and over here it's giving us an option, so we are going to choose personal. The author is Tom. Okay, save. All right. Yes. Okay, so the data is saved now, so let me just close this, go back to the desktop, and okay, so I think we have everything that we needed. We have a file which is not managed. We have a file which is managed in form of Excel as well as in form of desktop, in form of TextPad. So now what we are going to do is we are going to launch the Power BI application, and then we are going to see the behavior of the Power BI application when we try to import either of these files inside of it. Okay, guys, so my virtual machine was a tad bit slow, so I rebooted it, and now the Power BI desktop has been launched. So first thing that I would like to do is sign into it. Okay, all right, and okay, let me see what happens if I try to export an Excel file. So the first thing that I'm going to do is trying to export an Excel file which is not managed. So I am exporting this one. So ideally the data should get exported inside of Power BI, because we are trying to move data from a unmanaged application to an unmanaged application. So over here you can see that the data is loading. So let me just try to load the data here, and okay, let me just do an apply changes. So it might take a couple of minutes before the data is imported successfully. All right, so I think data is imported now. So if I make a selection and select all the columns, I should be able to see a graphical representation of the data that was selected. Okay, there you go. Now let me try and import an Excel file which was saved as managed. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to click on get data and then Excel, and then now I'm going to select the managed file. And when I do that, rightly enough, it says that your organization does not allow you to use work content here, because right now this is a managed file and this is an unmanaged application. So rightly so, it doesn't let us import the data. I'm not exactly sure whether we can import. Okay, we can import text files as well. So if I try to import a managed text file, it gives me the same message. However, I believe if I try to import a unmanaged text file, it should not it should not give us that message which we were just now looking at. So let's just confirm it real quick. So unmanaged. Okay. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to display. Okay, all right. So I mean, the motive here is to is to show that the data is moving in from an unmanaged application, but is not moving in from a file which is managed, which like it should be. So now what we are going to do is we are going to log into our Azure portal, and now we are going to make this application managed by using App Locker. So I'm going to show you guys how exactly to extract the App Locker file for the Power BI application, and then we can make this application managed. So the way we are going to do it is we are going to go to client apps and then app protection policy, and then this is our policy. So we have to generate an XML file which will be app locker. So I have already taken the liberty of exporting it. I'm going to show you guys how to do that, but for now, this is our app locker file. So let me just change the extension to XML, and then let me just import this file here real quick. So protected apps, add apps, and then we should be able to, not here, we should be able to import the app by selecting the XML file over here, which says that allow apps or app locker files which are XML. So we already have one. So I am going to import this one. The upload is complete. Okay, save. And I am going to make an entry as well. So the entry that the name is Power BI. I'm going to add the store app as well. So I'll actually explain what this is for. Let me just make it real quick. So the store app name is uh, 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 Microsoft Power BI. So that's the name. The publisher is, we have to make sure we are entering it exactly like this is. And the product name is Microsoft Power BI for Windows. So there you go. And the action is allowed. Let me do a OK and a save. Now let's just do a sync, but before we sync, I'm going to close the Power BI, and I'm going to do a sync of this device from the device end as well as from the portal end. So let's just go to Access Workers. Cool. Let's just click over here, info, and then run a sync. Let me minimize this, go to devices, all devices, go to my device, and run a sync from here as well. So guys, I ran a couple of sync. The last check-in time has not changed over here yet, but it should just be a couple of seconds because I was able to see the last check-in time in the device itself and it looked good. So let's just give it a try now. So let's just open up Power BI. Okay, so now if I look over here at Power BI desktop, it says as managed. So let me just launch the application and then see that whether the power, okay. So over here, one other thing that you would notice is right now it's saying that Power BI desktop has that briefcase icon right next to it. So, uh, 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 okay. All right. So over here again, you can see that there is a briefcase icon and it might welcome to Power BI desktop. I don't want to do this. Or do I have to do this? There is no option of skip. That's strange. All right. Let me just fill this up. What the heck? Okay. All right. I don't want to see this. Okay. Let me just sign in now. So it's going to be okay. All right. So now let's just do the same drill again. So, all right. Okay, so now you can see that it's also showing up over here. So now let me just do a get data again and then an Excel file. And first I'm going to import my personal file into this and see whether it's opening or not. It should, but provided it lets me. Okay, so I am just importing this now. Okay, let's just give it a, okay, so there you go. If I click on sheet one, I can see, and just like the previous time, data got imported right inside. Let me just apply the changes, and then we will be making the relevant selection for the columns. So I selected all the columns and now it's giving me a pictorial representation like it should. Okay, so we are good there. Now let me just import another Excel file and this time I'm going to import in a managed application. And when I do that, the magic happens and there you go. It is letting me import the data from the managed app as well right now. So now you can see that the second sheet has also been imported, and if I select on all the columns, I should be able to see the second data as well. Um, so right now what is happening is that Power BI is also being treated as a managed application. And since that's the case, therefore we are able to move data between managed app and managed app. I believe I should be able to import text as well. So if I do select this one, I should be able to import this. So I mean, the bottom line here is using App Locker, we can make this application managed. However, please keep in mind, this does not mean that the application is enlightened. So it might cause a little confusion that it's taking care of I mean, the WIP policy is taking effect on this application, then why am I saying that this application is not enlightened? I am saying, excuse me, I'm saying that because of this. When I try to save this, earlier when I was trying to save it, it was not giving me any work option of saving it under the work context. Please listen to this carefully. Earlier, it was not giving me any work context, it was only giving me personal context. Now, it is giving me a work context, but it is only giving me a work context. However, so this is the basic difference between a enlightened application and an unenlightened application. The common misconception is that an enlightened application is one which can comprehend and understand web policy, and an unenlightened application is one which cannot. No, that's not the case. On an unenlightened application also, we can make use of something called app locker. We can make it understand the web policy, and we can make sure that the application that the data which is getting created via this application is managed and protected and encrypted. However, the difference is that an unenlightened application such as Power BI will never give you the option of saving a file as work as well as personal, like an Excel or a notepad was giving you, which means that if by using app locker we try to implement a WIP policy onto an unenlightened application, the unenlightened application will understand the WIP policy, make sure that WIP policy is taking effect on the device. However, it won't give the user of creating a file using that application in a personal context as well as in the work context. So all the files that are going to be created via this application would be in the work context. On the contrary, if I am applying WIP policy on an Excel or a notepad, it understands the WIP policy and it gives the user the option of choosing whether that file is in the work context or personal context. If the file is saved in personal context, we can do copy paste out of that file. But if the file is saved in work context, we cannot, and only in that case the file is encrypted. However, in case of an unenlightened application, that's not the case. The unenlightened application will not let the user make use of the application for personal as well as work purpose, and everything that this application is going to touch is going to be encrypted and is going to be in the work context. So our gathering from this is two things. First, we need to understand the difference between, in short, difference between an enlightened and an unenlightened application. So we need to get this out of our mind that an unenlightened application is one which cannot which cannot understand the WIP policy, and via which and an unenlightened application is one which cannot be managed. No, that is not true. We just saw that Power BI Desktop was an unenlightened application. It is now understanding the WIP policy. The file that the Power BI is creating is getting managed and it is getting work protected and encrypted. The only difference between an enlightened and an unenlightened application is that an enlightened application would understand the WIP policy and would give the user an option of saving a file from inside of that application in personal as well as in work context. Only when the file is saved under work context is when the WIP policies are applicable, and is when the files are encrypted. However, so which means the bottom line is that the user can make use of that application for his personal usage as well as for his work related usage. Using the same Excel application, using the same MS Office application or Notepad application, the user can create a personal Notepad file as well as a work protected Notepad file. However, if it's an unenlightened application, it won't understand the WIP policy by default. We can make it understand the WIP policy by using something called app locker. However, if we do that, then it takes out the option of making use of this application and creating a file which is for personal purpose. So all the files that are going to be created using this unenlightened application for which the app locker has been uploaded is going to be work protected. All the files are going to be encrypted, and for all the files the WIP policy is going to take effect. Okay, so that's our conclusion from this. uh, it brings me to one more point. Let me just walk you through the WIP policy once again. So if you saw in the WIP policy, I did two things to make the Power BI desktop application managed. The first thing that I did was I uploaded the XML file. So if I upload the XML file, that's what makes it a managed application in the app locker. The second thing which I did was I added a store version of this app. So this is actually not a mandatory step. The only thing this does is when we go to the start menu and when we look at the Power BI desktop, it shows managed over here. That's the only thing it's going to do. If we add only this and don't add the app locker file, it's not going to work. If we add only the app locker file and we don't add this, it is going to work. However, it's not going to show you this managed thing over here, and it's not going to show you the briefcase icon like I can see over here. So to get this managed and get this briefcase icon, we need to add this store we need to add this entry for store. However, the real thing which is doing the trick is adding this app locker file. So once I add this app locker file, that is when the magic happens. So let me just walk you through what exactly is there inside the app locker file. So let me just quickly change it back to a txt and show you what exactly it comprises of. So app locker version is one. Rule collection, we have not configured anything for appx dll. For exe, nothing has been configured. Okay, so what happens is, by default, if we are targeting only the only the Power BI.exe, it does not work, because Power BI desktop.exe, it does not work because Power BI desktop.exe is running, but along with that there are many other processes which are running at the background. So we need to actually target all of them. So let me just take you guys to program files and then Microsoft Power BI desktop in the device. So I am going to this device and then program files and then Microsoft Power BI. Am I not looking at the right place? It is Microsoft Power BI desktop. Sorry. Uh, uh, Microsoft Power BI desktop bin, and over here inside bin we have Power BI desktop.exe. We have many exes. So let me just sort this by the type. And over here, you can see that Power BI is not the only application that we have. So Power BI is running, but at the back end, it is using these applications as well. So what we'll have to do, we will have to create an app locker file, and in the app locker, we will have to target all these applications. So that is exactly what we have done. I tested it with just Power BI desktop. It didn't work. I tested it with all these, and now if I targeted all of these in the app locker file, I was able to make it managed. So that's what I have done over here. Power BI desktop is over here, and then Microsoft.mashupcontainer.net fx45.exe. I mean, everything that I showed you guys over there is what we have selected over here in the app locker file. And nothing much to see here. I mean, the only selection that we had to make in the app locker file was all those applications, and this is the location wherein we had to make that selection. So once we have done that, once we have exported this file, uh, we have to import it like I just did, and then it should work.
That's pretty much it, guys. I hope that this deck was helpful in understanding what WIP is, how WIP behaves, and how it can be configured from the portal end and how we can troubleshoot it. If you have any queries, feel free to drop it in the comment section, and I will be very happy to assist you guys with the same. So I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing. This is Saurabh Sarkar, your friend, signing off.